Our story begins with a man who joked that married women were the best, only to find himself reincarnated from a lifelong bachelor into the body of a total scumbag. This man was an abusive husband, yet somehow he had married Shin Yuchu, a famous pop star who had even given him a lovely daughter named Wanwan. But ever since their marriage, he had been unexpectedly fired from his company, and he blamed her entirely, calling her a curse that cost him his job. As he looked at his new life, he couldn't help but mutter to himself that his predecessor really was a complete bastard. At that moment, we see the mother and daughter trembling on the sofa after a fresh bout of domestic violence, with Yuchu clutching her child tightly. Seeing him staring at her, she instinctively pulled Wanwan closer into her arms, her eyes brimming with tears of pure terror. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about taking Wanwan and leaving, but she was an orphan with nowhere else to go. Moreover, every scent they had was controlled by this monster, and seeing their fear, he let out a deep, heavy sigh. He decided to make the best of his new reality, slowly standing up to turn on the lights, filling the room with a warm, orange glow. As the light illuminated the space, he scratched his head in disbelief at the absolute mess before him, which, to be honest, was quite an understatement. He started by opening the windows for fresh air, then silently began picking up the empty liquor bottles while Yuchu remained frozen on the sofa. She didn't move an inch, though a flicker of confusion crossed her eyes as he chose not to disturb the mother and daughter. Instead, he grabbed a towel from the kitchen and wiped the tables until the house was spotless, leaving himself drenched in sweat from the effort. He then took clean clothes from the bedroom and headed into the bathroom, while Yuchu watched the door close with a wary gaze. Her tense body finally relaxed a little as she looked around at the clean room he had just finished tidying up. Her eyes were filled with intense disbelief, wondering how this demon had suddenly changed his nature, just as little Wanwan whispered that she was hungry. Yuchu gently stroked Wanwan's hair and told her to be patient, promising she would cook for her in just a moment. She felt she had to wait for him to go to sleep before she dared to make a meal for herself and the child, but then the bathroom door opened. The mother and daughter huddled together on the worn-out sofa as he walked out, but he simply shook his head and ignored them. He pushed open the front door and walked out, leaving Yuchu in a state of despair, wondering if he was simply going out to buy more alcohol. She assumed he hadn't had enough to drink yet, meaning she and Wanwan would go hungry again, and Shin Yuchu bit her lip as the tears began to fall. The little girl looked up and whispered, "Don't cry, Mama, Wanwan really isn't hungry anymore." Believing her own hunger was the reason for her mother's tears, Wanwan reached out with her small, pale hands to help. She clumsily wiped Yuchu's face, which only made the mother's tears fall harder, until a long silence finally settled over them. In a trembling, gentle voice, she finally spoke, telling Wanwan to be a good girl and let her mother tuck her into bed. She promised that once they were asleep, the hunger would fade, and she would wake up early to cook something delicious, which was a hopeful thought, at least. Wanwan nodded, telling her mother not to cry, while Yuchu began to softly hum a lullaby to soothe the child to sleep. Watching Wanwan's eyes slowly close, Yuchu reflected on the 2 years of misery since her marriage, her heart filled with an overwhelming bitterness. She finally made a choice. Tomorrow, she would leave this hell, deciding that even dying on the streets was better than being tortured by this demon. Suddenly, the sound of the door lock clicking echoed through the house, and Yuchu, still lost in her thoughts, couldn't stop herself from trembling again. She instinctively covered Wanwan's ears, listening intently to the movement outside as he pushed open the front door and returned. He looked toward the sofa and paused, realizing they must have retreated to the bedroom, likely without having eaten a single bite. He stood there staring at the food in his hands for a moment before setting it on the table and walking toward the bedroom door. Inside, Yochu's body was rigid with tension. Hearing his footsteps approach, she prayed silently that he wouldn't try to come in. But in the next moment, his voice came through the door, simply stating that he had bought some food for them if they were hungry. He told them to come out and eat, mentioning he would find somewhere else to sleep for the night, causing Yuchu to snap her eyes open in shock. She then heard his footsteps gradually fading away until the house became perfectly quiet once more. Only the sound of Yochu's nervous breathing filled the bedroom, while Wanwan, who had woken up at some point, lay there silently. The child had clearly heard his voice and the mention of food, which changed everything for a hungry stomach. Thinking of the meal, Wanwan swallowed hard and looked at her mother with pure expectation, while Yuchu could only look down in silence. Looking at her daughter's expectant eyes, Yuchu finally gathered her courage and tiptoed quietly to the bedroom door to open it. The aroma of the food on the dining table immediately hit her, and Shin Yochu's eyes instantly welled up with tears. He had actually bought a meal for them, yet, facing this sudden kindness, she felt no joy at all. Instead, she felt a deep, visceral fear, wondering why he was acting this way and what else he wanted from her. Barefoot, little Wanwan ran over on her short legs to peek through the door crack, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw the food. She couldn't help but drool a little, but she didn't move an inch without permission, showing remarkable restraint for a hungry child. She looked up at her mother with wide, unblinking eyes, until Yuchu took a deep breath and forced a small smile. Picking the girl up, she whispered that they should be very quiet while they ate their dinner. Wanwan nodded her little head hurriedly. While inside his own room, he heard the soft sounds outside and let out a heavy sigh. After that long sigh, he began to think, realizing only after buying the meal just how dire their situation was. He discovered that his entire savings amounted to only 1,800 yuan. He clearly needed to find a way to make money, and fast. Suddenly, he sat bolt upright, realizing he had been looking at things all wrong. After all, this was a parallel world. With a surge of excitement, he grabbed his phone and began scrolling through it, a smile slowly spreading across his face. This world was exactly as he remembered. The culture and the entertainment industry were completely different from his original world. Seeing mediocre songs topping the charts made him frown, and he gripped his phone as his mind began to race with possibilities. One by one, classic songs from his memory began to surface, but eventually, his exhaustion became too much to bear. Dragging his tired body to bed, he finally drifted off into a deep sleep until 6 o'clock the next morning. We see him quietly open his door to find the dining table and kitchen had been scrubbed spotlessly clean. He realized Shin Yuchu must have tidied everything up after their meal last night, which was a small but telling sign. He slipped into the bathroom to wash up, knowing that Yuchu usually didn't wake up to start cooking until 8 o'clock. In the past, the old version of himself would sleep until 10 in the morning, and only after he woke up and finished his drinking could the mother and daughter eat whatever scraps he left behind. Realizing this, he sighed again and quickly finished washing up. Inside the bedroom, Shin Yuchu was actually already awake, but she didn't dare go out until the sounds of his morning routine finally stopped. The front door opened and closed, and Yuchu remained silent, her eyes fixed on the bedroom door, wondering where he had gone this time. After waiting for a long while without hearing a sound, she glanced at little Wanwan, who was still fast asleep beside her. Gathering her courage, she finally decided to slip out of bed and quietly open the bedroom door to step outside. The smell of alcohol in the room had faded significantly, replaced by the pleasant scent of fresh air blowing in through the window. She stood there in a daze for a moment, and it was only then that she remembered she was only 24 years old. Suddenly, the sound of the front door echoed again, and Yuchu was startled, her entire body instinctively tensing up in fear. She turned around mechanically, and he froze in place as well, feeling quite awkward as he hadn't expected her to be awake yet. After washing up, he had realized there was no food left, so he had quickly bought meat, vegetables, and rice. Now, both stood there in silence. It was in this moment that he truly got a clear look at his wife's face, realizing just how beautiful she was. She was far more stunning than any celebrity from his original world, yet she was painfully thin, and her face was unnervingly pale. It was clearly the result of malnutrition, and seeing this, he felt a wave of pain, self-loathing, and embarrassment wash over him. He felt he deserved the worst for mistreating such a lovely wife, so he cleared his throat and muttered a quick, "Morning, I'll go cook." He was the first to break the awkward silence, quickly carrying the groceries into the kitchen to get to work. Yuchu could hardly believe her own eyes and ears. He had actually greeted her with a morning wish. Besides, she wondered when he had ever learned how to cook as she watched his busy silhouette through the kitchen doorway. A profound sense of grievance welled up in her heart, and she bit her lip hard as her eyes began to grow moist with tears. She wondered if this was pity or a sudden burst of conscience, just as little Wanwan woke up and began calling for her mother. Little Wanwan ran out on her bare feet, and the moment she emerged, her tiny nose caught the savory aroma of a home-cooked meal. She turned her wide eyes toward the kitchen, where we see that he had already noticed the little girl watching him. He offered her a wide, gentle smile, but Wanwan shrank back in fear behind Shin Yuchu. He could only rub his nose in helpless frustration. Before long, the food was ready, and he looked at the two of them standing stiffly in the distance, telling them to wash up and eat. Poor Wanwan was clearly swallowing her saliva in anticipation, yet she remained perfectly still, not daring to move a muscle. Yuchu watched the scene with a sense of dread, and though he had hoped for a warmer reaction, their defensive posture was hard to ignore. The hope in his heart sank to the bottom of the sea, and after a moment of silence, he sighed and told them to eat first. With that, he retreated into the side room, while Yuchu stood frozen, watching the door click shut behind him. She looked down at the longing in her daughter's eyes and let out a soft sigh of her own, telling Wanwan it was time to eat. On the table sat a pot of golden millet porridge that looked incredibly inviting, accompanied by two simple side dishes. Wanwan's eyes immediately locked onto a small bowl of steamed eggs, and in that instant, her entire face seemed to light up. She asked if her father had really made this for her, leaving Yuchu momentarily speechless and unsure of how to respond. Seeing the expectant look on her daughter's face, she finally nodded, and Wanwan's eyes sparkled even brighter than before. She couldn't wait to take a spoonful of the eggs, excitedly noting that this was the very first time her father had ever cooked for her. It was delicious, but Yuchu ate in silence, her heart torn between a deep inner struggle and a sense of utter confusion. Her gaze drifted toward the closed door of the side room. Inside, he was starving, but he knew the reality of the situation. He understood that, for now, the mother and daughter weren't ready to sit at the same table with him, so he tried to shake the thought away. He pulled out his phone, opened a popular social media platform, and deleted his old account which only had a few thousand followers left. After registering a brand new account, he habitually clicked on the trending search list to see what was happening in this world. A moment later, his brow furrowed in pure disgust as he wondered what kind of absolute garbage passed for music these days. He wondered when these mindless, last-minute pop songs started dominating the trending charts, and right then, a plan began to form. He searched through the desk and found several dusty sheets of music manuscript that Shin Yuchu had left behind long ago. Spreading the papers flat on the desk, his pen began to fly across the page, rapidly sketching out the 6-line musical notation. In his previous world, he had been a professional songwriter. Now, he was simply a porter of melodies, a task that was child's play for him. In just a few short moments, a complete and perfect musical score lay finished before his eyes. He eagerly pulled an old guitar from the back of the wardrobe and sat upright at the desk, cradling the instrument in his arms. After taking a moment to gather his emotions, he closed his eyes and let his fingers gently sweep across the strings. As the melody drifted out from the room, Shin Yuchu froze mid-meal, stunned by the realization that he actually knew how to play. It seemed impossible, as that guitar belonged to her, and she knew perfectly well he had never played a note in his life, at least, not before. She couldn't fathom what was happening, but as the guitar continued, his voice began to drift through the air in a soft, steady stream. Yuchu was left even more bewildered, her eyes filled with disbelief, and even little Wanwan, who had been eating happily, found herself captivated by the song, dropping her spoon to stare at the closed door with wide, blinking eyes. Wanwan tilted her head toward the sound, remembering that this was the very same day he had cooked for her for the first time. To her, her father's voice sounded incredibly gentle, and even though Yuchu had never heard this particular song before, she could sense its brilliance. It was hard to imagine such a beautiful melody coming from the man she thought she knew. But as the next lyrics reached her ears, Yuchu felt her composure break, overwhelmed once again by a deep sense of confusion and fear. She feared this sudden change in him was nothing more than a cruel, fleeting dream, and at that exact moment, the singing stopped. Wanwan noticed her mother's tears and, in a panic, scrambled up onto Yochu's lap to reach her face. She used her tiny hands to wipe away the tears, whispering for her mother not to cry and offering to blow on the pain to make it go away. The little girl assumed her mother was in physical pain again, and while she wiped the tears, she looked up with a face full of pure worry. As Wanwan pulled back Shin Yochu's collar to blow on the pain, we see the tragic reality. Her back was covered in a network of old scars. He had no idea, of course, about the emotional scene his song had caused outside. At that moment, he was simply opening his video account. He clicked record, making sure to keep his face hidden, showing only the area from his nose down to maintain a sense of mystery. Cradling the guitar, he cleared his throat, looking far more serious this time as he performed the entire song from beginning to end. Once the song ended, he saved the recording and carefully trimmed away the dead air at the start and the finish. Finally, he extracted the audio, added the lyrics and credits, and submitted the copyright ownership online, a professional move, to be sure. Only then did he craft a title, All My Life With You, an original song dedicated to everyone, with a hope that they might enjoy it. He asked for likes and support, and as the video finished uploading, he let out a long sigh of relief, feeling the first step was complete. Now, he would simply wait for the public's reaction, knowing this song would be a total game-changer in this era as he put the guitar away. He rubbed his growling stomach, wondering if the mother and daughter had finished eating yet. He was starving, which was a self-inflicted misery, really. Unable to wait any longer, he gently pushed the door open just a crack, peering out cautiously like a thief scouting a house. He happened to see Yuchu carrying little Wanwan away from the table, her eyes red and swollen as if she had just been crying. She clearly saw him too, freezing for a moment before quickly retreating into the master bedroom with the child. He let out a breath of relief. Stepping out to the dining table, he realized he could finally eat, noticing that they had clearly left some food aside specifically for him. A small spark of happiness warmed his heart as he picked up the bowl of millet porridge and began to eat it hungrily. After clearing every plate on the table and washing the dishes, he found himself with nothing to do, so he took a walk around the apartment. We see the layout of their home, a small 2-bedroom apartment, barely 50 square meters in size, where every inch felt cramped. It was a place they had bought together when they married, and all the furniture and decor had been handpicked by Yuchu herself. Everything now looked worn and dilapidated. He shook his head and sank into the sofa, finding it truly difficult to imagine their daily life. He wondered how Yuchu had managed to raise a child in such a suffocating atmosphere while he spent 2 years barely leaving his room. The feeling was akin to being in prison, and he knew all too well that he couldn't change their reality overnight. He could only curl up on the small sofa, fiddling with his phone to search for ways to maintain a home and make a child happy. As for how to be a good father, the online answers were a confusing mess that left him scratching his head in frustration. Suddenly, the bedroom door creaked open again. Following the sound, we see a tiny head peeking out from the shadows. Wanwan tilted her head, staring at him with those same almond eyes as her mother, curiously observing him with a bright, sparkling gaze. Her eyes were so full of innocent clarity that his heart nearly melted, though he noticed Wanwan's face was far too thin. He thought she and her mother would both look much better with a bit more weight, a fair assessment, given their recent hardships. Before this, the pair had survived on leftovers, often skipping meals entirely because the original husband refused to give them any money. Seeing Wanwan, a smile instinctively began to form on his face, but before his expression could fully soften, the little girl looked terrified, quickly slamming the door and scurrying back inside as Shun Yochu's voice rose to comfort her. His smile froze awkwardly, and he rubbed his nose with a sense of guilt as time ticked away toward noon. Still holding his phone, he finally stood up, realizing it was time to cook lunch. Just then, the bedroom door opened once more. An expressionless Yuchu emerged carrying a pile of clothes, walking past him as if he weren't even standing by the sofa. She headed straight for the bathroom, though her body stiffened visibly. He wondered if she was going to do the laundry. He suddenly remembered that the clothes he had changed out of yesterday were still sitting inside the washing machine. With that thought, he quickly followed her toward the bathroom, unaware that Yuchu was becoming increasingly nervous that he was still home. Usually, he would have gone out to drink with his fair-weather friends by now. Hearing his footsteps approaching, her anxiety spiked. Her body began to tremble slightly as he spoke up, mentioning that his clothes were still in the machine. He asked if he could take them out to dry first, but Yuchu, who was bending down to open the door, was startled by his voice. She stumbled back toward the corner of the bathroom, prompting him to tell her to be careful, a rare moment of genuine concern. Shin Yuchu finally realized that he was actually asking for her permission. Her eyes darted away, not daring to meet his gaze, as she whispered a soft okay. You take yours first, she stammered, while he stood there with clenched fists, his hands trembling slightly from the weight of the moment. Deep down, he was struggling to hide a mixture of anger and heartache, having just caught a clear glimpse of Yochu's neck. Beneath her collar were rows of purplish-red welts. He focused on gathering his clothes from the machine, not wanting to scare her further, and simply spoke up. I'll be making lunch in a bit, he said. Remember to call Wanwan out to eat. Yuchu replied softly that the little girl was still asleep. He suggested she wake her up in a while, but Yuchu only shrank back further into the corner, looking utterly flustered by his presence. He knew that staying there would only cause her more stress, so he rubbed his nose helplessly and pulled the rest of his laundry from the machine. After quickly hanging his clothes on the balcony, he headed straight for the kitchen. Meanwhile, back in the bathroom, a quiet tension remained. Yuchu stood frozen in place, clutching her pile of clothes, and only snapped back to reality when she heard the sounds of cooking starting in the kitchen. With trembling hands, she loaded her laundry into the machine, her gaze drifting instinctively toward the kitchen as she wondered what was happening. She couldn't help but wonder what had gotten into him. Then, Yuchu subconsciously rubbed her own nose and suddenly froze in realization. She wondered when he had developed that specific habit, and so, she stayed there by the washing machine, listening to the rhythmic hum of the drum. Her heart was a tangled mess of emotions until the cycle finished. She then took her clothes to the balcony, while the man remained busy. He was working away in the kitchen with great energy, and as it turned out, Wanwan woke up on her own without needing to be called. We see the little girl rubbing her sleepy eyes with her tiny hands, and the very next moment, she spots him busy at the stove. Her beautiful large eyes visibly brightened with curiosity, and she leaned against the kitchen doorframe, quietly watching his back. When Yuchu finished hanging the clothes and turned around, she witnessed this scene, little Wanwan watching with a face full of innocent expectation. Seeing him so busy in the kitchen caused Yochu's composure to break. She quickly turned away and leaned her back against the wall. She covered her face with both hands and slowly crouched down, tears falling silently. To be honest, this was a scene she hadn't dared hope for. It was a moment she had only ever seen in her dreams. Once again, he chose not to sit with them, simply placing the food on the table. He hurried out of the house, and as the sound of the door closing echoed, Shin Yuchu hurriedly wiped away her tears. She stood up and carried little Wanwan to the dining table, though we can only imagine how complex her emotions were. Even he didn't quite know what he was thinking. The food, however, was just as delicious as it had been at breakfast. The little one was happily eating her egg custard, but the mother and daughter's peaceful lunch was soon interrupted by the door opening. They instinctively looked up to see him walking in, carrying a large bag of items as he pushed the door open. Wanwan leaned closer to Yuchu, her small spoon still in her mouth as she paused mid-bite. Her large eyes followed his every move, while he kept his gaze low, not daring to look at the startled pair. He simply walked to the sofa, set the bag down, and finally began to speak. Yuchu didn't respond, and after a brief, heavy silence, he continued with what he had to say. He told her he wouldn't drink anymore, nor would he ever hit them again, urging her and Wanwan to feel at ease. He explained that the child was still young, and such a tense atmosphere wasn't good for her. He said it all in one breath. Feeling the weight on his chest lift slightly, he didn't wait for a reply and retreated silently to the side bedroom. Yuchu watched him disappear and heard the door close, feeling more lost for words than ever after such a strange day. Faced with this man's sudden transformation, she found it impossible to let her guard down just yet. Inside the bedroom, his own heart was heavy, his eyes were red, showing he had clearly been crying while outside. Deep down, he almost wished he hadn't traveled to this world to witness such pain, especially after seeing Yochu's scars. His heart felt as though it might break from the pressure, unable to fathom how anyone could be so cruel to their own family. They left some food for him, but when he stepped out and saw the bag he had bought for them on the coffee table, he realized it hadn't even been opened. With a quiet sigh, he sat down to eat alone, but then something unexpected happened. The bedroom door creaked open, and little Wanwan poked her head out, staring at him with curious eyes as he quickly forced a smile. This time, she didn't run away in fear, and we see him relax slightly as this fragile little soul begins to heal his heavy heart. He set down his chopsticks and, with all the gentleness he could muster, softly called out to Wanwan, though his voice still made her tremble. Instead of retreating, she glanced back into the bedroom, and as if receiving some silent encouragement, she turned her gaze back toward him. A tender, fragile voice drifted from her lips as she called him Papa, and hearing that single word changed everything. His entire body shook and his eyes brimmed with tears. To be honest, it was the most beautiful sound he had heard since arriving here. Little Wanwan tilted her head, watching him cry and smile all at once, while he nodded firmly and stood up to reach for the bag. He pulled out the doll and gave it a gentle shake. We can see a flicker of longing finally appearing in Wanwan's large eyes. She looked at the doll, then back at the bedroom, taking quite a long time before she finally began to shuffle slowly toward him. His heart hammered against his ribs, filled with a sudden, desperate fear of scaring off the little one who was finally approaching him. She walked right up to him, tilted her face up to sniff the air, and in the next second, a joyful smile broke across her face. She noted that Papa didn't smell like alcohol anymore, then looked at the doll, her small hands twitching with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. She wanted to take it but didn't quite dare, her dark eyes fixed on him. He, of course, understood her silent plea immediately. He slowly knelt to meet her gaze and gently placed the toy in her hands, and finally, Wanwan accepted the gift. As her tiny fingers brushed the doll's dress, her eyes crinkled into crescent moons, and he watched her, overwhelmed by her simple joy. His heart was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, especially as he saw, from this close, just how thin her little face had become. He gritted his teeth and quickly wiped away his tears, forcing a smile as he sat back to quietly watch her play. In this moment, nothing else in the world mattered to him. While inside the bedroom, Shin-Yuchu heard her daughter's bell-like laughter. She was already moved to tears. Not long after, Wanwan grew sleepy, still clutching her new doll tightly to her chest. She gave him one last look as he sat there smiling like a fool, then ran back to the bedroom, but he had no idea what was happening elsewhere. In just one night, his song had begun to take the world by storm, and by 10 o'clock, his video had climbed to 5th on the trending charts. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of Dosho, the door to the office of Li Xia, the director of operations, was suddenly interrupted by a sharp knock. A technician rushed in, clutching a tablet and drenched in sweat, shouting that there was a special situation that Director Li needed to see immediately. He explained that a video had surged to the 5th spot on the trending charts in just 2 hours. She asked, quite calmly, which big influencer had messed up this time. The technician replied that it wasn't a famous creator at all, but a new account registered just today, and the video hadn't received a single bit of official promotion. The content was simply a song, and upon hearing this, Shia's expression shifted instantly as she pulled up the trending list herself. Her surprise only deepened when she saw it had already climbed to 4th. She decided to listen for herself, and once the song ended, Xia fell into a complete silence, moved by the beauty of the music, before clicking on the profile to see the name, Buffon. Without delay, she turned to her assistant Lu Yun and ordered her to push the video to the entire platform to ensure it hit #1 by tomorrow. Lu Yun nodded eagerly, knowing her instincts had been right, while Xia stayed behind to listen to the song just one more time. She tapped her fingers on the desk thoughtfully before picking up her phone to send Buffon a private message, though he, of course, had no idea any of this was happening. We see him waking up at 5 in the morning to head out for a run, quickly realizing that this body is in much worse shape than he imagined. He was gasping for breath after only a short distance, but by stopping and starting, he finally managed to finish 5 kilometers an hour later. It was 7:30 by the time he returned home, and as he pushed the door open, he ran right into Shin-Yuchu, who had just finished washing up. With droplets of water still clinging to her hair, she jumped in surprise at his sudden appearance. He felt a bit awkward as he spoke up. He asked if Wanwan was still asleep and suggested she go check on her while he took a shower and prepared breakfast for them both. When he asked if there was anything specific she wanted to eat, she stammered that anything was fine before hurrying off to see the child. She practically bolted into the bedroom, leaving him to shrug helplessly at the closed door before he headed off to wash up himself. By now, he was starving, and the original owner's alcohol cravings were starting to kick in, forcing him to gulp down hot water while he cooked to distract himself. Just then, little Wanwan woke up. Clutching the doll he had given her, she peered around the kitchen doorframe to watch him work. He turned around and saw the little one standing there, breaking into a warm smile as he asked what she wanted Papa to make her for breakfast. Wanwan tilted her little head, thinking for a long time before deciding that she wanted steamed eggs, her absolute favorite. He agreed warmly, reaching out to ruffle her hair, but stopping himself just in time, fearing he might startle her. He told himself there was no rush, as seeing Wanwan slowly begin to accept him filled him with a newfound sense of hope. In that moment, even his hunger and alcohol cravings seemed to vanish. He set the table and retreated to his small bedroom. He wanted to let the mother and daughter eat in peace, but this time, he noticed the sound of laughter from outside. Lying on the bed, he picked up his silenced phone to check the video's performance, only to be stunned the moment he unlocked it. He stared in disbelief at the sheer number of notifications, swallowing hard before clicking on his profile page to see the results. The sight of over 1 million followers nearly blinded him. With a racing heart, he clicked on the video itself to see more. With over 2 million likes and nearly 1 million comments, he couldn't stop smiling. He had become a star overnight. The comment section was filled with nothing but praise and demands for new songs, leading him to the moment of financial truth. He opened the back-end wallet, and the number staring back at him made his jaw drop, a staggering 320,000. Without a single advertisement, he had earned that much in a single day just from traffic, and while he was sleeping, no less. He finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that with this money, their days of struggling were finally coming to an end. To be honest, having only 1,000 yuan to his name had made even buying groceries a source of constant anxiety. He quickly transferred the earnings to his bank card and waited for the two of them to finish eating before stepping out. After finishing the leftovers and washing the dishes, he grabbed his phone and hurried out the door with a purpose. We see him walking through the old neighborhood they had bought into for its cheap price, once dreaming of moving somewhere better. Unfortunately, the original owner had squandered their savings and even sold Shin Yochu's phone for alcohol. He headed toward the mall. As soon as he walked through the entrance, he spotted a store for a major domestic smartphone brand and headed straight for it. A young saleswoman noticed him, her eyes lighting up as she approached to ask if the handsome stranger was looking for a new phone. He nodded, scanning the glass display cases before pointing to a specific model and asking to see it. The saleswoman complimented his taste, noting that it was their latest product and even featured satellite calling. When he asked if they sold SIM cards, she confirmed they did, assuming it was for his own personal use. He explained it was for his wife, causing the saleswoman's expression to shift into a flicker of hidden disappointment. She likely thought all the good men were already taken, yet she politely remarked how lucky his wife was. However, she explained that the user needed to be present with their ID. He hadn't expected such strict requirements. He simply asked her to pack the phone, paid quickly, and hurried out, knowing his shopping list was still long. Time was of the essence. Meanwhile, back at the house, Shin Yuchu had finished cleaning every corner of their home. She sat on the sofa looking out the window, enjoying the fresh air now that the smell of alcohol had vanished. Watching Wanwan play happily, a small smile touched her lips. This peaceful life felt wonderful, but then, the moment broke. The sound of the door lock turning startled her out of her thoughts, and Wanwan scrambled up in a panic. The little girl clutched her doll and dove into her mother's arms as noisy, familiar voices drifted in from outside. He was out there telling someone to be careful not to scratch anything as they moved something heavy inside. She quickly picked up Wanwan to retreat to the bedroom, but curiosity kept her eyes fixed on the doorway. A moment later, he appeared in her line of sight alongside a stranger, both of them working hard. We see them carrying a cream-colored cloud sofa into the room. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. With a look of pure joy, he asked if she could possibly pour a few glasses of warm water. He wanted the workers to have a rest. Shin Yuchu, out of practice with social interaction, felt momentarily overwhelmed. She agreed and hurried to the kitchen, while the smile on his face only grew wider and more genuine. Though he was drenched in sweat, he was full of energy as he helped the men settle the new sofa. After that, the old sofa was hauled out, followed by the television, the fridge, and even the old wallpaper as the new furniture arrived. The house was transformed in an instant, looking entirely brand new, while the discarded old pieces were left waiting for their fate. In the end, he sold all the old furniture for 800 yuan, a price that made Shin Yuchu feel a bit of a sting in her heart. They were old, yes, but still functional, and she couldn't help but wonder where he had suddenly gotten all this money. By her calculations, they should have been struggling to put food on the table, yet here he was, carrying a large bag back into the living room. He surveyed the results of his hard work with a satisfied grin, wiping his brow and deciding that this finally felt like a real home. He placed the bag on the new coffee table and sank into the soft sofa, while the mother and daughter stood frozen in the kitchen. Wanwan clung to her mother's leg like a curious little seedling, her eyes darting left and right at the unfamiliar surroundings. Seeing the little one like that made his eyes crinkle with a sense of true achievement, so he pulled a large pink toy from the bag. He set it on the table while keeping his gaze fixed on Wanwan, and as expected, her attention was instantly captured. He beckoned her over with a gentle hand and a doting look, calling out for her to come see what her father had bought. However, Wanwan didn't run to him immediately. Instead, she looked up at her mother, waiting until Shin Yuchu gave a silent nod. Only then did she take a few hesitant steps toward him, and he quickly unwrapped the toy, a beautiful princess house. He remarked that the princess house looked a bit messy and asked if Wanwan would help her father decorate the little princess's home. Wanwan's eyes sparkled instantly as she leaned in closer, eventually shuffling all the way to his side. With a gentle smile, he picked up the tiny doll and sighed in a playful, high-pitched voice that the princess wasn't dressed yet. He told her that her father didn't know how to dress a princess, so he would have to leave that very important task to her. As he spoke, he held the doll out toward her, and Wanwan blinked her large eyes before tentatively reaching out her small hand. He kept smiling until she finally touched the doll, at which point he gently placed it into her tiny palm. And then, he reached out his own large hand to gently steady hers. He told Wanwan that he would leave the task of dressing the little princess to her, asking if she could teach her father how to do it. Feeling the warmth of his hand, Wanwan looked at the doll and then at his mock-pitying face, suddenly giggling and calling her father silly. She offered to show him how, her little white teeth flashing in a bright smile as she leaned trustingly against his leg. As she clumsily pulled the dress onto the doll, he laughed along with her, playing the role of a humble student under the little one's guidance. We see them learning how to dress the princess together, and in this moment, the small room suddenly feels incredibly bright and warm. Meanwhile, Shin Yuchu leaned against the doorframe, watching this beautiful scene until her eyes began to grow moist with tears. The father and daughter hadn't been playing for long when he looked up and noticed Shin Yuchu lost in a daze. The faded light blue shirt she wore suddenly caught his eye, and he squinted as a sharp realization hit him. He realized it was a matching family outfit that Shin Yuchu had secretly bought for Wanwan's second birthday, behind his back, of course. Back then, he had beaten her for buying it and even sold her phone. Remembering this, he fell into a heavy, dark silence. A second later, he stumbled to his feet and rushed into the bathroom, overcome by a sudden, violent urge to vomit. It seems that when a person with a conscience revisits such cruelty from a first-person perspective, the disgust is physically unbearable. This sudden outburst terrified the mother and daughter. Shin Yuchu trembled violently, her old fears rushing back in an instant. She dashed to the sofa and scooped Wanwan into her arms, while the little girl buried her face deep into her mother's chest. They were terrified that the man in the bathroom would suddenly charge out and begin his usual cycle of abuse and shouting. After a long while, he emerged from the bathroom looking disheveled, his eyes bloodshot as he looked at the frightened pair. His heart ached and his stomach continued to churn, but he forced himself to endure the discomfort and spoke in a weak voice. He apologized for scaring them, claiming he just felt unwell, though the thought of inhabiting this monster's body made his skin crawl. It felt as if 1,000 ants were biting him, and seeing their guarded expressions, he could only let out a heavy, weary sigh. He quietly headed toward the kitchen, suggesting that Shin Yuchu play with Wanwan a bit more while he prepared their lunch. Shin Yuchu watched his face closely, so familiar yet so strange, and after a long minute, she finally gave a small nod. She sat back on the sofa with Wanwan, and the little girl peeked out, relieved to see he was still the same gentle father. A smile finally returned to her small face, and soon, the savory aroma of lunch began to drift through the living room. However, Shin Yuchu noticed that after setting the table, he quietly retreated to the side bedroom. Her lips moved as if to speak, but she couldn't find the words. During the meal, Wanwan held her spoon and suddenly asked why her father wasn't eating with them. Shin Yuchu was chewing a piece of stir-fried meat, his favorite dish, though he hadn't tasted it in a very long time. He had always claimed he couldn't eat spicy food, a lie to save the best for them. Hearing her daughter's question, she looked toward the bedroom. She turned back and suddenly smiled, a look as bright as a flower in spring, though her heart was likely heavy. She told the little one that Papa just wasn't ready yet, leaving the child to wrinkle her brow in confusion. Inside the bedroom, he sat in a daze, trying to convince himself those past cruelties weren't his fault, though the guilt remained. To distract himself, he began scrolling through videos, seeing that his song was still sitting at the very top of the trending charts. The comments were flooded with fans begging for new music. Just then, hearing the sound of dishes being washed, he stepped outside. They had left a plate for him on the table. Shin Yuchu was in the kitchen, while Wanwan played with her new toys. Seeing him emerge, Wanwan didn't seem as frightened as before, and he smiled gently while patting her small head. He looked toward the kitchen just as Shin Yuchu walked out. Seeing him staring, she immediately grew tense and nervous. She gripped the hem of her shirt helplessly, and seeing her so submissive and fearful, he couldn't help but frown. Deep down, he sighed, realizing it was her gentle and reserved nature that had allowed his predecessor to bully her so ruthlessly. Noticing her fear, he quickly smoothed his expression to put her at ease, trying to erase the shadow of his frown. He then took the new phone from the coffee table, placed it on the dining surface, and spoke to Shin Yuchu in a soft tone. He told her he bought it for her, and asked if she'd sit with him to discuss a few things, a simple request that felt monumental. Shin Yuchu had been keeping her head low, but hearing him speak, she suddenly looked up to meet his gaze. She first noticed the clarity in his eyes, and then her focus shifted to the brand new phone box on the table. After a brief moment of hesitation, she gave a soft hum of agreement and slowly sat down on the sofa. Her voice was so quiet one had to strain to hear it, but he didn't press her. Instead, he picked up the box. He began unboxing it himself, revealing a new sky blue phone, and started the simple setup process right then and there. He handed it directly to Shin Yuchu, explaining it was for her and that she'd just need to get her own SIM card. He mentioned he had already saved his number inside, so she could call him if anything happened while he was out. As he spoke, he pulled a thick stack of bills from his pocket and placed them before her, cash he had just withdrawn. He suggested she take the child out for a walk that afternoon, noting that staying inside all day wasn't good for them. He told her to buy whatever they needed, especially clothes, as he'd noticed their current outfits were becoming far too small. He let all his thoughts pour out at once, while Shin Yuchu simply looked up, her eyes fixed intently on him. As she listened to his gentle nagging, her eyes slowly began to redden with unshed tears. To be honest, it was a lot to take in. Seeing her hesitate to take the phone, he rubbed his nose awkwardly, wondering if she simply didn't like the color or the model. He told her they could go buy a different one if she preferred, but Shin Yuchu just gave him another deep, searching look. She quietly told him that wasn't it at all. She actually liked it very much. He looked away uncomfortably but felt a wave of relief, telling her there was no need for thanks before heading to eat. He sat at the table and began eating heartily, while Shin Yuchu remained on the sofa, her mind swirling with questions. She wondered where all this money had come from, yet she didn't ask, choosing instead to examine the new device. Little Wanwan crawled over as well, looking at the shiny new object in her mother's hands with pure, childish curiosity. Shin Yuchu patted the little one's head, and the two of them began studying the phone together as he finished his meal. He was drenched in sweat and really wanted to take a shower, but the mother and daughter were still in the living room, making him feel a bit self-conscious. In the end, he could only retreat to his side room in frustration until 5 in the afternoon, when the outside air finally began to cool down. We see Shin Yuchu on the sofa, glancing at the money on the table one last time before finally picking it up. Soon after, she led little Wanwan out of the house. The child hadn't been out in a very long time and absolutely loved exploring the world. Since her mother hadn't taken her out before and her father hadn't allowed it, this outing made her exceptionally happy. The little one held her sheep doll in one hand and her mother's hand in the other, skipping and jumping along the way. Her big, round eyes wandered everywhere, as everything outside felt entirely new and full of wonder to her. Shin Yuchu, however, felt quite stiff, and her pace unconsciously quickened as she watched the many pedestrians passing by. She felt strangely inferior, especially since she and Wanwan were wearing clothes that didn't fit properly. It made her feel exposed. She worried that others were constantly staring at them. The mall wasn't far, and she vaguely remembered it was just 2 streets away. The mall had changed quite a bit from her memory. In just 2 years, it seemed to have been renovated into something much more exquisite. Upon entering, she spotted a mobile phone shop with a counter for SIM cards, and after a moment of hesitation, she decided to go in. The store was quite crowded, and the staff all seemed to be bustling about with various customers. Having not interacted with people for so long, Shin Yuchu stood there feeling a bit lost, until a female clerk finally noticed her. The clerk approached and gently patted Wanwan's head, saying with a warm smile that the little one was very well behaved. When asked if she wanted to buy a phone, Shin Yuchu smiled back, happy to hear the praise for Wanwan, and explained she needed a SIM card. She asked if it was possible to get one now, and the clerk, still smiling, began guiding her toward the service counter. The clerk assured her they could help and mentioned several plans to choose from, though she asked what brand of phone she was using. She explained that if the phone was the same brand as their store, there would be a discount, a word that made Shin Yuchu's eyes light up. She quickly pulled the phone from her pocket and held it out to the clerk, softly asking if this one would qualify. "It seems to be your brand, and it was just bought this morning," she said, as the female clerk's expression brightened with recognition. The clerk took a closer look at Shin Yuchu. After all, they had only sold a couple of these latest models so far today. Since she was here for a SIM card, the clerk naturally thought back to the man from this morning. So this mother and daughter. Were they the wife and child of that handsome man? She wondered why they looked so thin, and why their clothes clearly didn't fit. That man didn't seem like the type to mistreat his family, the clerk thought, feeling a bit puzzled, though she didn't ask. Still wearing a professional smile, she exclaimed, "Oh, so the handsome gentleman who bought the phone this morning is your husband. You really are so lucky. Since this is our latest model, you're actually eligible for this specific service plan." She offered a deal to top up 100 and get 100 free, including 600 minutes of talk time, maintaining her enthusiastic service throughout. Only this time, the focus of her attention had shifted from the man to Shin Yuchu, who felt a bit dazed by the sudden friendliness. She paid the fee and successfully got her card. Even as she walked out, the clerk's warm voice was still echoing in her head. To be honest, hearing him called a good man made Shin Yuchu want to tell her she was welcome to take that good man home herself. After getting the SIM card, Shin Yuchu went to open a bank account to deposit the rest of the cash she was carrying. After the phone expenses, she had 4,900 left. The man had given her exactly 5,000 that morning, which was quite a sum. Leaving the bank with her phone and card, she looked at the surrounding skyscrapers and suddenly felt as if she were truly alive again. She realized she could take the child and leave. With this money, she could find a job and support them both on her own. She could even pursue her own dreams again. This sudden sense of freedom was almost overwhelming for her. Shin Yuchu stood there in a daze for a long time, until a small, tender voice pulled her back to reality. "Mama, can Wanwan have an ice cream?" she asked, as Shin Yuchu realized the little girl was still tightly holding her hand. Our little Wanwan was staring intently at a nearby ice cream shop with round eyes, looking as if she might start drooling at any second. Shin Yuchu smiled, a bright, radiant smile. You can, but only one, or your little tummy might start to hurt, okay? Little Wanwan declared she loved her mother most, and as the pair finally headed out, we see you taking a relaxing bath, completely unaware. You had no idea that Shin Yuchu might not actually return. After your bath, you simply began preparing tonight's dinner. Following your routine of 2 meat and 2 vegetable dishes, you decided on noodle soup, though you weren't sure exactly when they'd be back. Because of that, you didn't cook them just yet. You set the side dishes on the table and left the sliced noodles ready on the cutting board. Returning to the living room, you collapsed onto the sofa and scrolled through parenting tips. One suggested a good scolding if a child won't eat. But that would never do for you. Wanwan is so well-behaved. How could she refuse to eat? Besides, she's far too adorable for that. To be honest, you couldn't bear to lay a finger on her. Eventually, the scrolling made you drowsy, and you let out a long yawn. Checking the time, you realized it was already 7 in the evening. You suddenly sat bolt upright, wondering why they weren't back yet. A wave of anxiety hit you. What if something had happened? You hurriedly stood up and put on your shoes, preparing to go out and find them. But just as you opened the door, you ran right into them returning from the outside, a light, pleasant fragrance wafting into the hallway. You stood there completely stunned. Shin Yuchu was humming a soft, unknown tune, her footsteps light and effortless. The slight curve of her lips made it clear she was in an excellent mood, and we see she was carrying several shopping bags. Wanwan held onto the corner of her mother's shirt with one hand, while the other still clutched that doll you had given her. What truly shocked you, however, was that they were both wearing brand new, well-fitting clothes. Their bright, lovely eyes met yours. They also seemed startled to see you there, but a moment later, Wanwan sweetly leaned in and called out, "Papa." It was obvious that after a day of fun and new clothes, Wanwan was incredibly happy. That single word, "Papa," well, it nearly made your soul take flight. Your voice trembled slightly as you answered, then you knelt down to ruffle her hair. You scooped up the adorable little girl and led the way inside, asking if she'd like some noodles for dinner. "With 2 eggs?" you asked. "Yes, Wanwan loves eggs, and Wanwan loves Papa most," she chirped happily. Outside the door, Shun Yuchu stood frozen in the breeze. The little one had just said she loved her mother most, yet she had defected in an instant. Wanwan didn't have to wait long at all. The noodles with eggs were ready in no time, and he brought the steaming bowl over to her. He gave her little nose a playful tap, and then, out of habit, turned to head back toward the bedroom. But just as he turned around, he suddenly felt the little girl tugging on the corner of his shirt. "Can Papa eat with Wanwan?" her soft voice asked once more. He turned back and met Wanwan's expectant gaze, feeling a wave of hesitation wash over him. To be honest, this situation was incredibly difficult to navigate. He wished for a clear answer rather than this heavy, uncertain silence. He decided to test the waters, suggesting he stay and eat with her, and Wanwan immediately chirped that Papa should sit right beside her. She happily patted the chair next to her, and with a slightly awkward expression, he rubbed his nose and brought another bowl from the kitchen. He took his seat beside Wanwan, so with Mama on the left and Papa on the right, little Wanwan was right in the middle. It was the first time we see her surrounded by both parents, and the smile never left her face as she ate with newfound enthusiasm. She finished the entire bowl of noodles, and eventually, Shin Yuchu had to step in and stop her, fearing the little one would overeat. Only then did the little girl stop, though after dinner, Wanwan's wish for both her parents to play in the main room together. Well, that wish went unfulfilled. In the end, he was the only one playing with Wanwan, while Shin Yuchu, having finished her meal, returned to the main room alone. He understood, of course, letting him sit at the table at all must have required a massive internal struggle for her. He tried to put himself in Shun Yuchu's shoes, imagining how he would feel in her position. After suffering through the kind of treatment she had endured in the past, the resentment would be deep. He told himself that living peacefully with an enemy would be impossible. In fact, if roles were reversed, his old self would likely be, well, let's just say he wouldn't even have a body left to find. He continued playing with Wanwan until 9 o'clock that night. By then, Wanwan was so sleepy her little head was nodding off, yet she still refused to go to bed. During this time, he noticed a rather serious problem. Wanwan was already 3 years old, but the little girl still didn't know how to do certain things. She couldn't even take off her own shoes, even though most 3-year-olds are already at the age to start preschool. He knew exactly why. This was the result of a broken family environment, and while he knew he couldn't rush the process, seeing her like this was still incredibly heart-wrenching. It was at this moment that Shin Yuchu walked out of the bedroom. She didn't say a word, simply watching him and Wanwan on the sofa in silence. Her gaze was clear enough, and understanding the silent cue, he gently picked Wanwan up from the sofa. He gave her little cheek a kiss and said with a smile, "Wanwan, it's time for bed. Papa will play with you again tomorrow, okay?" Wanwan's eyes, which were nearly closed, fluttered open. She looked at his face and then turned her head to look at Shin Yuchu. Then, the little head suddenly buried itself into her father's neck as she whispered, "Wanwan wants to sleep with Papa tonight." The sudden request left him completely at a loss, and we see Shin Yuchu's expression darken slightly as the air in the room turned heavy and silent. He looked at Shin Yuchu with a face full of innocence. After all, this was the little one's own idea, not something he had coached her to say. Shin Yuchu secretly clenched her fists, thinking the little girl was a bit of an ungrateful wolf for choosing the enemy after only 2 days. It seemed the child had been corrupted by sugar-coated bullets, and in the end, the little one got her way after Shin Yuchu finished washing her up. The little girl happily crawled into her father's bed, clinging to his neck like a little koala and refusing to let go. He simply let her hold him that way. It was his first time ever putting a child to sleep, and he recalled some parenting tips he'd seen online. And so, he began gently telling Wanwan a bedtime story, and very soon, the little girl drifted off, feeling utterly content. She fell into a deep sleep, and the next morning, while Wanwan was still dreaming, he woke up early as usual. He crept out of the bedroom on tiptoe and headed to the living room to go for a run, but then he stopped, unable to believe his eyes. He rubbed his eyes to be sure. The ointment on the coffee table had actually disappeared, and his eyes began to brighten with hope. A genuine, heartfelt smile spread across his face, and he left the house that morning with a newfound sense of joy. Between the morning run, a shower, and cooking, over 2 hours passed. Once breakfast was ready, he had one more task to attend to. It was time to wake his daughter, and as Wanwan stirred to his gentle voice, she rubbed her sleepy eyes and saw him immediately. A sweet, charming smile slowly blossomed on her face, and the little girl reached out with her soft, tiny arms. She reached out with her tiny arms, clearly wanting her father to hold her, and he immediately leaned in to gently pick her up. He dressed her in the new clothes they had bought just yesterday before carrying her to the bathroom, relying on parenting videos he'd watched. We see him trying his best to care for the little one, but theory is one thing. Putting it into practice is quite another. The little girl's body felt so delicate that he was afraid to use any force, making the entire process look rather clumsy and awkward. This was especially true when it came to tying her hair. He felt completely out of his depth despite struggling with it for ages. In the end, the pigtails were hopelessly crooked, and Wanwan, seeing her reflection in the mirror, giggled that her papa was a big dummy. She pouted her little lips to tease him, so he playfully pinched her nose, which sent Wanwan into a fit of adorable, bright laughter. She reached out her own tiny hand to pinch his nose in return, just as Shin Yuchu emerged from the bedroom to witness this heartwarming scene. She didn't say a word, simply heading into the kitchen to bring out breakfast, though perhaps even she didn't realize she was smiling. The corners of her mouth had unconsciously curled upward as the three of them sat down for a simple, quiet family meal together. Afterward, he didn't hand Wanwan back to Shin Yuchu, but instead brought her to the sofa to continue playing with her toy princess house. However, during their playtime, he began subtly introducing some very simple numbers into her little head without her even noticing. Starting with the numbers 1 through 10, he had quietly devised a plan to help Wanwan overcome her developmental delays through play. His goal was to foster a sense of independent learning, moving from basic numbers to essential common sense and daily life skills. He knew he would have to teach Wanwan slowly. It wasn't something that would succeed overnight, but fortunately, the little girl was very bright. It seemed no one had ever bothered to teach her before, and under his gentle guidance, she quickly began to memorize the new information. Moreover, we noticed that since Shin Yuchu returned yesterday, she seems to have suddenly become a completely different person. There was a certain spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a positive sign that made him feel much more at ease. As Shin Yuchu sat nearby downloading apps, she kept a close eye on the interaction between the father and daughter. She realized then that he was subtly educating Wanwan, and as she watched them in silence, a faint sense of sweetness filled her heart. He had wanted to teach the child for a long time, but given their previous family environment, even surviving was a struggle. She simply hadn't had the capacity to teach Wanwan like a normal mother would, so Shin Yuchu looked back at her phone screen. It was certainly a top-of-the-line model. The software download speeds were incredibly fast, taking only a few seconds. Once the apps finished downloading, Shin Yuchu logged into her WeChat, and unread messages immediately began to pop up. They were from Chu-Chu, her assistant of 2 years. Her contact list was small, consisting only of you and a few others. The messages from Chu-Chu had been sent continuously from the time she married until just 2 days ago, a persistent stream of concern. Most were asking how she was doing, but she had never been able to reply. Seeing them now, Shin Yuchu felt a warmth in her heart. She immediately sent a reply, apologizing to Chu-Chu for the silence and reassuring her that she was doing well now. Within 2 seconds of sending it, a reply flashed back. Sister Shun, you're finally alive. Chu-Chu had feared that after the wedding, she didn't want to stay in touch. She explained that since Shin Yuchu vanished, rumors had run wild. The office was full of gossip, especially from that annoying Lioli, who had become insufferably arrogant over the last 2 years. Lioli told everyone that Shin Yuchu got what she deserved, a statement that clearly made Chu-Chu's blood boil with indignation. Shin Yuchu pursed her lips slightly. She felt that Lioli wasn't entirely wrong, and that she really had brought this on herself. She had always outperformed Lioli at work, so it was only natural for her rival to act this way after she left the industry. Instead of addressing the drama, she simply asked Chu-Chu how her own life was going and if she was doing all right. Chu replied that she was a survivor, but that she missed her dearly, asking if Sister Shun would ever make a comeback. Shun Yuchu hesitated, a flicker of longing appearing in her eyes as she wondered if returning to her career was even possible. She looked at you, then at Wanwan, and the spark of desire slowly faded. She replied that she likely wouldn't, but suggested they meet up. Meanwhile, we shift our gaze to the Tianmei Entertainment Building in the heart of Jiangxing City. There, a young girl about 5 feet tall was trembling with excitement, her hands shaking as she stared at her phone. She was typing away on her phone when a sharp, female voice suddenly snapped her out of her joy. It was Zhao Chuchu's superior. Are you slacking off? Get back to work. Do you still think you're the assistant to a top star? If you don't want to work, then get out of here. The voice belonged to a woman with a fox-like face, her chin tilted up in a haughty display of arrogance. Her eyes were full of disdain as she snapped. What are you looking at? Get that equipment to the studio. If you delay my recording, can you even afford the loss? Chu rolled her eyes privately, but she still hoisted the heavy gear and headed toward the recording room. All right, Sister Shun, I'm off this Saturday. Let's talk then. Shin Yuchu smiled as she read the final message from her friend. A genuine look of happiness finally crossed her face. Finding no other messages, she decided to switch over to her Weibo account. Her last post on the platform was from 2 years ago, the official statement announcing her retirement from the entertainment industry. Her once hundreds of thousands of followers had dwindled to a few thousand, yet a few loyal fans remained, still checking in on her. They often left caring comments, which she browsed through before glancing at the trending topics and the latest celebrity gossip. Surprisingly, several of the top trends were discussing a song that had recently gone viral, titled Life With You, a truly divine melody. A mysterious singer had gained 1 million followers from a single video. Who was she? Everyone was looking for a deep analysis. The posts promised to break down this hidden treasure of a song. Naturally, Shin Yuchu was curious to hear what all the fuss was about. She wondered what kind of music could cause such a stir, so she clicked the link. Her screen immediately jumped to a video interface. As the familiar guitar melody began to play, the living room fell silent, the song echoing softly in the ears of the 3 people there. You turned your head away awkwardly while little Wanwan, her big eyes blinking, crawled into Shun Yuchu's arms to see the screen. Shin Yuchu froze in complete disbelief. This voice, this was the exact same song she had heard coming from your room just 2 days ago. It turned out that you had been recording a video that day. Wanwan was the first to speak, pointing her tiny finger at the phone screen. She looked up at Shin Yuchu and exclaimed, "It's Papa. Papa is in the phone." "Yes, it's Papa," Shin Yuchu replied, stroking the girl's hair. She finally understood where all the money for the new furniture had come from. The video already had millions of likes. How could there not be money? She turned to look at you, her gaze lingering on your sharp profile with a complex, unreadable expression. Having received her mother's confirmation, little Wanwan happily dove back into your arms, her short hands cupping your face. Her large eyes were full of light as she spoke in her milky voice, saying Papa was so gentle and that she wanted to sing too. With those soft little hands pressed against your cheeks, your gaze gradually melted, and you used your own large hands to mirror her. You cradled your daughter's small face and asked if she really liked singing. "I love it," she replied, her eyes crinkling into crescents. She answered without a moment's hesitation, her smile growing even brighter. You promised to teach her, so she could sing inside the phone too. Wanwan nodded her little head nonstop, then leaned in and gave your cheek a forceful, happy kiss. A reward for the teacher, perhaps. Having received your prize, you beamed with joy. Under the little one's worshipping gaze, you hurried to the side room to get your guitar. Returning to the sofa, you cradled the instrument and tuned the strings. It was time for a private performance for our small audience. You turned to see Shin Yuchu and Wanwan both watching you without blinking. You gave them a playful, coaxing look to ease the tension. Strumming the strings, you announced that today, Papa would create a children's song just for Wanwan. You would sing it once for her to hear. Then, you suggested singing it line by line so she could follow along. Wanwan nodded cheerfully, her excitement practically radiating off her. Her little face was full of anticipation. You told her the song was called Explosion of Courage and asked her to listen closely. With that, you gently swept across the strings, and a light, cheerful melody began to echo through the living room. Surprisingly, Wanwan's sense of rhythm was excellent. She began swaying her head and body in perfect time with the upbeat melody. You couldn't help but follow the little one's lead, swaying your body alongside her. It was a charming sight, to be perfectly honest. Watching the father and daughter move in perfect sync, Shin Yuchu's gaze softened, and a smile finally graced her face as she joined the rhythm. For the first time, the entire family was immersed in a sea of joy. At this moment, even the living room seemed to brighten with the music. Following the lyrics, Wanwan balled her tiny hands into fists and made a heroic Superman pose. You set the guitar aside to join her. You mirrored the little one's gestures perfectly, then reached out a finger to gently boop Wanwan's upturned little nose. Wanwan pounced into his arms, her short little hands tightly hugging his neck as she whispered that she loved this version of her papa. She begged him never to change back to how he was before. Hearing her soft, fragile voice, he could only open his mouth in silence. Suddenly, his eyes grew misty with tears. He pulled Wanwan into a tight embrace, burying his face deeply against her small clothes. With a hoarse but firm voice, he promised her that Papa would never be like that again. Shin Yuchu couldn't see his expression just then. Though tears were streaming down his face, he was actually smiling. He knew, with absolute certainty, that those dark days were gone forever. Never again. He was the first to compose himself, setting the guitar aside and lifting Wanwan onto his lap to begin their lesson. He asked Wanwan if she was ready to learn, suggesting he sing a line and she follow along. She agreed immediately, of course. Wanwan was quick to say yes, and the rest of the morning transformed into a private teaching session for the father and daughter. The living room echoed with their singing, and seeing them so immersed in the music, Shin Yuchu quietly began preparing lunch. However, her cooking clearly didn't match his newfound skills, leading Wanwan to insist that she only wanted to eat Papa's food from now on. This earned the little one a playful, jealous glare from Shin Yuchu, who grumbled internally about her ungrateful little daughter. It had only been 2 days, and the girl was already bought off. Still, this warm atmosphere felt like what a real family should be. Wanwan was a fast learner. In just 3 days, she was able to sing the entirety of Explosion of Courage without missing a beat. At Wanwan's insistent request, he filmed a video of her performance and uploaded it to the social media platform. In the video, Wanwan wore a pink princess dress and a bow, her tiny body swaying rhythmically to the upbeat music. She was utterly adorable. While filming, his face beamed with such pride that he looked like a completely different person, a doting father. Watching from the side, Shin Yuchu caught a glimpse of his proud expression and nearly choked back a laugh. It was a first for her. She never imagined he could ever make a face like that. Over these 3 days, thanks to his excellent behavior, things had shifted. The tension between him and Shin Yuchu had eased considerably. Now, she would even take the initiative to speak a few words to him. No one expected that the second video on this account would be a children's song, and once again, the music was entirely original. The song was just as beautiful as the last. At the platform's headquarters, Luya noticed the video the very moment it was uploaded. After watching the entire clip, she didn't give it a second thought before granting it maximum promotion. After all, who could resist such an adorable little girl? With such a catchy song, Luyan couldn't help but grin from ear to ear like a proud Andy. Naturally, the platform's trending list exploded once again. Before the waves from his previous hit had even settled, the storm of Explosion of Courage began to sweep across the internet. This time, the heat built even faster. In just a single afternoon, the like count soared to a staggering 5 million. The comments were so numerous it was almost absurd, forcing him to silence his phone once again as evening approached. We see him sitting on the sofa with Wanwan in his arms, tirelessly scrolling through the comment section, which was filled with quite the colorful characters. He found himself unable to stop reading. One user wrote that if they had a daughter this cute, they wouldn't allow any boys within a 100-mile radius. That was the most liked comment of all. On Saturday morning, just as he finished his run, he wiped his sweat and pushed open the front door. He was greeted by the sight of Shun Yuchu emerging from the bathroom in a newly bought night dress. She had clearly just finished bathing. As she dried her hair, her face was slightly flushed from the steam. The two of them simply stood there, staring at each other in silence. A line of poetry suddenly drifted through his mind, describing a beauty so natural it needed no adornment, like a lotus rising from clear water. It was the perfect description for Shun Yuchu in that moment. Seeing him staring at her like a complete dunderhead, she felt a bit exposed. Shin Yuchu instinctively covered her chest as her face turned a deep crimson, the blush even reaching the tips of her ears. Even though they had been married for over 2 years, the atmosphere felt strangely like that of a young couple who had only just met. She managed a quiet, good morning, trying her best to stay calm while her footsteps toward the bedroom grew noticeably faster. He gave a simple reply, but she didn't say another word, practically fleeing back to her room. He could only offer a helpless smile. Shaking the stray thoughts from his head, he hummed a tune and headed to the bathroom. It was time for his new routine: shower, cook, and wake Wanwan. When he pushed open the bedroom door, Wanwan was still fast asleep, her tiny mouth slightly open in a peaceful daze. She was sprawled out across the large bed. After a few days of proper meals and regular sleep, she finally looked like a healthy, happy child. Wanwan's complexion had become much more vibrant. Though she was still quite thin, her overall spirit had visibly improved. He sat by the bed for a moment before leaning down to gently pinch her nose, whispering for her to wake up for breakfast. The little one pouted her tiny lips and blinked her eyes open, and the moment she saw him, the corners of her mouth curled upward uncontrollably as she slowly reached out her short arms to hug his neck. She called out for her father in a sweet, clingy voice, and with a smile, he lifted her up and carried her out. He placed her on a stool by the sink. For the past 2 days, she had been learning to wash up while he supported her. He helped with the toothpaste and towels, noting how clever Wanwan was. It only took 2 days for her to master the skill. Just then, Shin Yuchu emerged from her bedroom, having tied her long hair up high behind her head. She had styled it into a neat little bun, a look that made his eyes light up with genuine surprise. He nodded to himself, thinking this was the vitality a woman in her 20s should have, though she was still far too thin. He felt she would look even better with a bit more weight, while Shin Yuchu herself felt nervous, her cheeks flushing slightly. It was her first time dressing up like this at home, and she found herself wondering if it actually looked good on her. She sat at the table quietly, telling herself that since his eyes had brightened, the look must be a success. Then, she suddenly caught herself. Why on earth did she care what he thought? She puffed out her cheeks in a bit of self-annoyance. She stirred her bowl aimlessly with her chopsticks, feeling frustrated at her own lack of resolve. At that moment, he sat down with the freshly washed Wanwan, who gave her mother a sweet, morning greeting. The little girl picked up her special spoon to scoop some golden porridge, just as Shin Yuchu asked if he could go out with them today. He was busy enjoying the meal when her question caught him off guard, and he looked up at her with a puzzled expression. Shin Yuchu nodded without meeting his gaze, though her earlobes had already turned a vivid, telltale shade of red. She had arranged to meet her assistant, Zhao Chuchu, at a milk tea shop, and she had her own reasons for bringing him and Wanwan along. It was all because Zhao Chuchu wanted to see the little one, and since Wanwan had become his shadow lately, they were practically inseparable. So, in a way, he was simply riding the little one's coattails. After 2 long years, Chuchu was finally going to see Sister Shin again. Chuchu was visibly excited, having bought several cups of milk tea early while she sat staring fixatedly at the shop's entrance. We should note that Chuchu and Shin Yuchu had worked together for over a year, becoming as close as biological sisters. It was a pity, really, that Shin Yuchu eventually chose to be with him, a decision Chuchu could never quite understand. She couldn't fathom why her friend insisted on staying with such a worthless man, despite all the advice she had given her back then. But Yuchu had been stubborn, and as Chuchu sat lost in these wandering thoughts, she suddenly spotted a familiar figure. Walking through the door was Yuchu, holding the hand of a bouncing little toddler, and Chuchu's eyes lit up instantly. She stood up abruptly, waving her left hand and calling out for Sister Shun, which caught Yochu's attention immediately. Looking up to see that waving hand, a genuine smile spread across Yochu's face. Chuchu, it seemed, hadn't changed a bit. She was still as lively and cheerful as ever, and as they approached each other, their eyes grew misty with joy. When sisters meet after such a long separation, it's only natural for emotions to become a bit difficult to suppress. Chuchu looked closely at Yuchu, her eyes reddening as she grabbed her hand and pouted, noting how much weight she had lost. She demanded to know if that man was mistreating her, offering to teach him a lesson, but Yuchu simply pressed her lips together. They sat down together, with Yuchu pulling Wanwan close to her side before gently telling Chuchu not to worry. She explained that he was treating her well now, before asking if Chuchu's work had been going smoothly since she left. The little one had been sitting quietly by their side, while Chuchu was preoccupied with catching up and reminiscing. But now, taking a proper look at the child, Chuchu's eyes sparkled at the striking resemblance between the girl and her mother. It was as if they were cast from the same mold, especially those soulful, lively eyes that made it impossible not to love her. Chuchu leaned forward, asking if this was indeed Wanwan, gushing over how adorable she was as she began to rise from her seat. She crouched down before the little one, reaching out to stroke her small face, but then her brow furrowed slightly. The child was just like Sister Shun, far too thin, and Chuchu felt a wave of indignation rising within her. She was certain that worthless man was mistreating both Shun and the child, and the more she thought, the angrier she became. She wanted nothing more than to confront him, so she looked up at Shin Yuchu and asked where he was. Didn't Yuchu say he was coming too? Yuchu could sense Chuchu's hostility toward him, though she didn't quite know how to explain. She could only offer an awkward smile, mentioning that Wanwan wanted ice cream, and he was likely off waiting in line. Naturally, Chuchu noticed the look on Yochu's face, and deep down, her suspicion only grew stronger. Her dear sister Shun had always been gentle and reserved, but now, that gentleness seemed tinged with a certain timidity. Sensing this, and not wanting to frighten the child, Chuchu simply let out a cold snort and returned to her seat. Secretly, she was gritting her teeth, imagining all the ways she'd like to deal with him, when she suddenly froze mid-sentence. Her gaze sharpened as she looked toward the entrance of the milk tea shop, leaving Yuchu looking even more embarrassed. Yuchu assumed he had arrived and triggered Chuchu's hostility, so she began to turn around to see for herself. Instead, a sharp, shrill voice rang out from behind her, asking Chuchu if she really had time to be drinking milk tea. The voice demanded to know if her work was finished. Chuchu's face darkened as she snapped back that it was her day off. Like a bristling kitten, Chuchu glared at the newcomer, while Yuchu finally turned to see who it was. We see it is Lioli, a popular starlet from their former company who was known for being a talented singer. Lioli smirked, asking why Sister Shin wasn't at home playing the dutiful wife instead of out looking for Chuchu. Her eyes were smiling, but her words were dripping with mockery, a classic display of feigned politeness, really. Before Yuchu could even respond, Chuchu exploded, telling Lioli to mind her own business since it wasn't a workday. Chuchu picked up Wanwan and grabbed Yochu's hand to leave, but Lioli stepped forward to block their path. She looked at Shin Yuchu, her eyebrows twitching as she smirked, asking why she was so thin and if life had become that difficult. Lioli continued, suggesting that if things were truly bad, she could offer some charity, since she was so kind-hearted, of course. She pointed out that Chuchu was currently working under her as a mere assistant and doing quite well, wouldn't she agree? Zhao Chuchu's face turned pale with rage as she stared at Lioli in silence, while Yuchu turned to her in total shock. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. After all, such a role was pure manual labor, and she couldn't understand why the company would do this. But since now wasn't the time for questions, Yuchu turned back toward Lioli, her gaze finally sharpening with a rare spark of anger. Just as she was about to speak, Chuchu cut in, declaring that her contract with the company would expire at the end of the month. She planned to resign then, adding a sharp warning that the higher some people climb, the harder they eventually fall. She suggested that if Sister Shin ever returned to the industry, certain people would be having nightmares, which made Lioli freeze for a moment. Deep down, Lioli still lived in Yochu's shadow. Back then, Yuchu had dominated the scene for over a year, while Lioli remained a nobody. However, Lioli quickly recovered her composure and laughed, looking at Yuchu with a gaze full of pure contempt. She called the idea of a comeback the funniest joke she'd ever heard, doubting any company would sign a washed-up artist with a child. Glancing at the little girl, she remarked that Yochu's child was actually quite pretty, suggesting she should consider her future. She mockingly suggested training the girl to be the next big star, her face twisted in disdain as she lost herself in her own arrogance. She actually reached out to pinch Wanwan's small face, but a voice thundered out, telling her to get her filthy hands away immediately. The warning was clear. If she touched the child, she wouldn't even have a place left to cry. Chun Fan walked up with a fierce look in his eyes. He handed the ice cream to the three of them before stepping in front of Lioli, shielding both Yuchu and Wanwan behind his back. Lioli was startled, instinctively taking 2 steps back. It seems Chun Fan's angry expression carried quite a bit of pressure. But after steadying herself and looking closely at him, she suddenly laughed, recognizing him as nothing more than a useless pretty boy. She mocked him openly, asking if he actually intended to hit someone in a public place, which only made Chun Fan frown. Chun Fan turned back toward Shin Yuchu with a questioning look, clearly asking where this aggressive woman had even come from. She explained she was a singer from her former company, never expecting to run into her here, noting that his anger might not scare others. But Yuchu herself felt a flicker of fear. Seeing him look at her that way, she lowered her head slightly in a rare moment of vulnerability. Our protagonist's frown deepened, and he let out a silent sigh before turning his attention away from Yuchu and back to the confrontation. He stared down at Lioli with cold indifference, stating that he had never heard of this singer, nor did he have any desire to know her. He calmly told her that a good dog doesn't block the path and asked her to move, which, naturally, made Lioli's voice turn even more shrill. She called him a pretentious fraud, and as he thought over the names she spat out, he finally remembered who these people were. They were members of the boy band the original owner of his body had belonged to before he tried to restart his failed career. Back then, he had constantly treated them to drinks to suck up to them, though they never spared him a glance. "I don't know them," he said. He warned her that if she kept pestering them, he wouldn't hesitate to call security, forcing Lioli to glare at him before finally stepping aside. He took Yuchu by the hand, with Zhao Chuchu following close behind, as they began walking straight toward the exit. However, as they brushed past Lioli, she suddenly spoke up again, her voice dripping with a cruel sort of pity for Yuchu. She mocked the fact that certain people could no longer sing, announcing that her own new song would be released at the end of the month. Lioli burst into a delighted laugh, asking how Yuchu could ever hope to compete with her as her voice echoed unpleasantly in their ears. Chuchu looked as though she wanted to charge back and slap her. She knew how much Sister Shin loved singing and how painful this was. To say such things was nothing short of psychological warfare. Even Chin Fan paused for a moment, casting a deep, lingering look at Lioli. He then continued walking out with an expressionless face, while Yuchu remained silent, merely biting her lip in a quiet display of hurt. And then, quite suddenly, a soft and youthful voice rang out through the tension of the moment. Little Wanwan had decided to speak up for her mother. Chun Fan froze for a second before smiling and gently stroking the little girl's head. Deep down, he was impressed, thinking to himself that she truly was his daughter, and any lingering anger he felt vanished the moment she spoke. Any lingering anger Chun Fan felt vanished instantly, and he didn't even bother to glance back at Lioli's reaction. We see the group finally leave that den of trouble behind, eventually making their way to a quiet restaurant. Shin Yuchu and Zhao Chuchu began to chat. There were things Yuchu had been worried about, but hadn't asked while walking. Now that they were finally seated without outsiders around, she took Chuchu's hand and asked the question weighing on her mind. She asked why Chuchu was doing menial work for Lioli, and more importantly, what had become of Sister Yun. Sister Yun had been Yochu's former manager, a woman nearly 40 with a strong will, but the news was not good. Chuchu's expression darkened with visible sadness as she explained that Sister Yun had been fired shortly after Yuchu left. She had struggled to find work for a long time, and later, when her mother fell ill, she had to stay at the hospital. To make ends meet, she had taken a job as a nanny, a downfall Yuchu never could have imagined for her. Her vision blurred slightly as she recalled Sister Yun's once capable and brisk manner while they worked together. Both women fell into a heavy silence. Yuchu bit her lip, knowing deep down that her own impulsiveness was to blame. Sister Yun had defied the company's orders so many times for her sake back when Yuchu still had a bright future. The company stayed quiet then, but once Yuchu walked away from it all, it was easy to guess how they treated Yun. The atmosphere remained somber as they finished their meal, and after a few more words, Chu-Chu hurried off. Yochu's mood remained low, even though the three of them had originally planned a special family outing. She had wanted to visit the amusement park, but now the joy had vanished, a shift in spirit that Chen Fan clearly felt. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but in the end, the words stayed trapped behind his teeth. To be honest, he still didn't understand why she had been so determined to marry him in the first place. Yuchu felt like going home to be alone with her thoughts, but then she saw the expectant look in little Wanwan's eyes. She couldn't bear to let the child down, so our little family of three continued on to the amusement park after all. The little one was absolutely thrilled. It was her very first time at an amusement park, and she pulled on Chen Fan's hand, ready to charge inside. Shin Yuchu also forced herself to cheer up, as she didn't want Wanwan's memories of her first park visit to be tainted by sadness. And so, our little family started with the carousel before moving on to experience several other attractions together. The sky grew dark without them even noticing, and as the park's colorful lights flickered on, they headed toward their final stop, the Ferris wheel. By the time Chen Fan carried Wanwan into the cabin with Yuchu, the little girl had already fallen fast asleep in his arms. As the wheel slowly ascended, the glowing buildings on the ground began to shrink, but there was something Chen Fan didn't realize. This was actually Yochu's first time at an amusement park as well, and her very first time sitting in a Ferris wheel. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she stared out the window, watching the world below with a genuine, childlike wonder. Chen Fan found himself watching her instead. Sensing his gaze, her ears turned a soft red, and she gave him a playful, shy glare. It was a look he had never seen from her before, and as the cabin lights illuminated her thin face, he found it almost overwhelming. The brightness felt sudden and dazzling. The wheel continued its slow climb, and a moment later, from every corner of the castle below, fireworks suddenly erupted into the night sky all at once. In that blooming light, he saw it clearly. A pure, radiant smile appeared on Yochu's face, a smile from the bottom of her heart that left him completely dazed. As they reached the very top, the fireworks became even more vivid, making her delicate features look more enchanting than ever. He told her she didn't have to be afraid anymore, but amidst the booming fireworks, his voice was too quiet for her to hear. She turned to him with a look of confusion, but he didn't meet her eyes, choosing instead to watch the brilliant sparks as he spoke softly. He said she was too gentle, and that being so kind would only lead to being bullied. He knew she wanted to sing. He told her he knew there were many things she wanted to do, and that she should go do them. He would take care of Wanwan. Yuchu didn't respond. When he finally turned his head, he saw 2 trails of tears glistening on her cheeks as she stared at him without blinking. The sheer intensity of her grievance and the complexity in her eyes felt like a wave about to drown him, making him feel instantly nervous. He couldn't understand why she had suddenly started crying, but Shin Yuchu simply kept her eyes fixed on him. Her almond-shaped eyes were clouded with mist, and though her voice was soft, it resonated deeply within his heart. He remained silent as the air grew heavy. It felt as though even the sound of the fireworks had vanished. After a long silence, he gave her a gentle smile and spoke, his voice suddenly sounding a bit raspy. "I am Lu Fan." Yuchu continued to watch him, and his smile made her heart race like a startled deer. His answer was entirely unexpected. As she looked into his clear, bright eyes, her tears began to fall even faster. She pulled her knees to her chest, buried her head, and whispered through her sobs, "That's right, you are Lu Fan. Who else could he be?" She then offered to tell him a cliché story about a timid little girl in an orphanage. In that orphanage, there was an older boy who always protected her, and one day, when a group of boys bullied her, that boy shielded her behind his back, taking every blow himself until he was covered in bruises just to keep her safe. In her eyes, that boy was her entire world, but shortly after that day, he simply disappeared. It wasn't until she grew up that she saw him again, and eventually, her wish came true when she married him. Lu Fan listened in stunned silence, finally understanding the truth as Yuchu looked up with tear-filled eyes. She looked so lonely and fragile as she finally revealed the secret buried in her heart. No one had ever understood her stubbornness. Everyone thought her devotion wasn't worth it, yet she believed it was, even if the outcome had turned out so poorly. She had regretted it countless times until this new version of him appeared. For her, knowing he was Lu Fan was enough. Suddenly, he truly understood her feelings, and seeing the tenderness in his gaze, Yuchu could no longer hold back. She threw herself into his arms, competing with little Wanwan for space as she sobbed quietly, which woke the child up. With sleepy eyes, the little one looked confused to see her mother occupying her favorite spot, but only for a moment. Then, full of joy, she hugged them both and planted a big, happy kiss on each of their cheeks. It was, without a doubt, the best day of little Wanwan's life, and as Lu Fan looked at the 2 beauties in his arms, he couldn't help but smile. The trajectory of his life was finally moving in the right direction, which was enough, though he realized some of his plans would need to change. As the fireworks faded and the Ferris wheel slowly descended to the ground, Shin Yuchu walked ahead with Wanwan while Lu Fan followed behind. He rubbed his nose, watching her carefully. The moment they stepped off the ride, she had pulled away from his embrace almost instantly. In an instant, she seemed to have regained her usual cold attitude toward him, but inside, Yuchu was actually a nervous wreck. She held Wanwan with a grip that was far too tight, feeling her earlobes and cheeks burning with a heat she couldn't suppress. She couldn't believe she had stayed in his arms for so long, acting like a little girl and leaning into him. It was truly mortifying. Deep down, she was certain he was secretly laughing at her, especially after what she had seen when they stepped out of the cabin. She had caught the faint trace of a smile on his face, and at that thought, Yuchu began to walk even faster. She was practically power walking, and Lu Fan, confused by her sudden burst of energy, actually had to jog just to keep up with her pace. It wasn't until they passed through the amusement park gates that he realized she had no intention of stopping, forcing him to call out. "Hey, you aren't planning to walk all the way home, are you? Let's catch a taxi here," he said, finally making her halt. She stood by the roadside refusing to look at him, convinced he was mocking her from behind, which, naturally, only made her feel more embarrassed. It took a long time to finally hail a taxi, a delay that gave Lu Fan his very first serious thought about buying a car. Once they returned home, he settled Wanwan into her room and headed straight for his own bed, falling into a deep sleep almost immediately. But while he slept peacefully, Yuchu found herself tossing and turning, unable to find rest as soon as she closed her eyes. Scenes from their day at the amusement park kept flickering through her mind, playing on a loop she couldn't switch off. Feeling a bit annoyed with herself, she pulled the quilt over her face, trying to force her brain to finally shut down and sleep. However, her fluttering eyelashes gave her away, showing just how restless and unsettled her heart truly was in that moment. At 6 the next morning, Lu Fan woke up right on schedule, completing his routine of running, washing, cooking, and waking Wanwan without a hitch. And yet, we see that Shun Yuchu has not emerged from her room. Looking at that tightly closed master bedroom door, Lu Fan scratched his head in confusion. It seemed they had returned quite late last night, as she was surprisingly still asleep, but he had no intention of waking her just yet. He decided simply to leave a portion of breakfast for her, and after washing and putting away the used dishes, he stepped out of the kitchen. At that moment, Yuchu finally got up, crossing the living room with a slightly flushed face to wash up, when Lu Fan asked if she still wanted to sing. Hearing his voice, she froze for a moment, offering no reaction for quite some time, as if the question had caught her off guard. He leaned against the bathroom doorframe with his phone in hand, quietly waiting for her answer while the silence stretched between them. Finally, her soft voice reached his ears with a single, simple word, yes. In her heart, there was no need for a longer explanation. To be honest, her current life was already something she hadn't dared to imagine for 2 years, making her singing dreams feel like a distant memory. Those dreams remained buried deep within her, so Lu Fan didn't press further. He simply nodded and returned to his room with his phone. He opened his private messages to start searching, though his inbox had long since exploded with notifications after his very first video went viral. He had only skimmed through them once and ignored the rest, making it difficult to find anything now, yet he patiently continued scrolling through the screen. He filtered through the messages one by one until, suddenly, his eyes lit up as he clicked on a specific notification. As he read the contents, his fingers tapped rhythmically against the screen. Originally, his only goal in posting videos had been to make money. His plan was to earn enough to settle Wanwan and Yuchu comfortably before quietly stepping away from it all, or so he thought. However, after yesterday's events, his perspective had shifted. The message was simple. Fanching Entertainment was inviting him to join their team. They claimed that with his musical talent, they could transform him into a top-tier superstar in the shortest time possible. At the end of the message was a contact number for Fanching Entertainment, which happened to be one of the 3 giants in the country's industry. Without a moment's hesitation, he dialed the number, and after only a few rings, the call was answered on the other end. A professional voice came through the receiver asking who was calling, to which he replied that his account name was Buffon. He explained that he had received an invitation from their company and asked if it was a convenient time to talk. Meanwhile, far away in the capital, at the headquarters, Shurya received the call and froze for a moment. She hadn't expected this creator named Buffon to actually reach out. To be honest, it had been several days since she sent that private invitation, and she had nearly given up hope. She assumed he had no interest in the entertainment world, but hearing silence on the line, he gently asked if she was still there. Li Shurya snapped back to reality, and we see a look of pure joy suddenly spreading across her face. After all, there was no doubt that this mysterious Mr. Buffon was currently the most talked-about person on the entire internet. She introduced herself as the Deputy Director of Human Resources, eagerly asking if he was finally ready to join Fanching Entertainment. He apologized, explaining that he had no personal plans to enter the industry, but he wanted to recommend another singer instead. Shurya couldn't help but feel a wave of disappointment, shaking her head with a wry smile. It was Buffon she truly wanted. She explained that while she could make the decision herself for someone of his fame, a recommendation was a different matter entirely. He told her not to worry, promising that the singer's talent was top tier and, more importantly, that he would be the one writing the music. Understanding his implication, Shurya agreed to consult with her superiors, and he calmly told her he would wait for the news. 5 hours later, the call finally came back. They had reached a decision regarding his recommended talent. They were willing to accept the new singer, but the higher-ups pointed out that Buffon currently only had 2 songs to his name. Since one of those was a children's song, they admitted the tracks were good but wanted to see more of his range. They asked if it would be convenient for him to prove his composing skills, which, naturally, was their way of saying they didn't trust him yet. His answer was simple and clear: he would do it. There was no hesitation in his voice whatsoever. Shreya had been feeling quite anxious, but hearing his confident agreement brought her a sense of profound relief. She personally believed in his talent, and despite the skepticism from above, she had fought hard to get him this one chance. As it happened, a company called Hua Ing had recently presented several entertainment firms with a very difficult musical challenge. They had invited many famous songwriters, yet every submission had been rejected. Now, everything depended on whether Buffon could solve it. Shiryu assured him that once he succeeded, the company would never doubt him again, asking if they could meet in person to discuss the details. She explained very sincerely that he would need to come in and demonstrate his songwriting and composing skills right there on the spot. Deep down, she was also dying to see what this mysterious fellow actually looked like. Meanwhile, Buffon realized he had little to do besides childcare. Since his schedule was clear, he readily agreed, asking for the time and place. She suggested Modu, and if possible, that he arrive tomorrow. She noted that the sooner he arrived, the better it would be for his reputation, so they settled on meeting the following afternoon. After hanging up, he booked a 10 o'clock flight for the morning and soon drifted into a deep sleep until Shun Yuchu returned. When Yuchu arrived home with little Wang Wang, they found him fast asleep. The little girl quietly walked over and snuggled into his arms. In his dream, he felt as though a small cat were rubbing against his face, making it hard to breathe until he suddenly jolted awake. Wang Wang's cheerful laughter echoed in his ears, and looking down, he realized it was just his precious daughter playing a prank. She had used her warm little hands to pinch his nose, announcing it was time for dinner. He smiled, feeling that this life was truly wonderful. The delicious aroma of food wafted over from the dining room at that moment, making him realize just how hungry he had become. We see Shin Yuchu emerging from the kitchen carrying 2 bowls of rice, glancing at him while softly explaining the situation. Since he hadn't woken up, she had gone ahead and prepared a meal that looked and smelled absolutely perfect, earning his immediate praise. Feeling a bit shy from the compliment, Yuchu nodded and returned to the kitchen for the last bowl so the family could eat together. As he placed a piece of crispy meat into Wang Wang's bowl, he turned to Yuchu and mentioned that he had to go out the next day. He wasn't sure how many days he would be gone, and hearing this, Yuchu, who was mid-sip of her soup, suddenly began to choke. She couldn't stop coughing, and as he worriedly handed her a tissue, she turned away to compose herself and wipe her mouth. The sudden news of his departure left her feeling quite flustered, and she found herself hesitating, unsure if she should even ask where he was going. Ironically, though she had wanted to run away only a week ago, she now felt a subconscious reluctance to see him leave. It was little Wang Wang who finally asked the question, and he gently rubbed her head, telling her he was going to find a job for her mother. He then turned his gaze toward Shin Yuchu, admitting with a hint of apology that he had made this decision for her without asking first. He explained that since things weren't finalized, he hadn't mentioned it, but now a company wanted to meet and discuss a potential deal. If it worked out, she could return to the stage properly. Fanching Entertainment seemed like a good fit for her singing career. As Yuchu looked at him, she saw how serious he was, and in that moment of eye contact, her eyes filled with a deep sense of trust. Suddenly, a mist of tears blurred her vision as her eyes turned incredibly soft and tender, a look that, to be honest, was a bit much for him to handle. He quickly lowered his head to focus on his rice. Meanwhile, Yuchu could hardly believe that the day she could sing again had actually arrived. And the fact that this man had chosen this path for her moved her deeply. She whispered a sincere thank you, confessing how much she truly loved to sing. Her voice grew firmer as she spoke. She loved music, but she also wanted a better life for Chu Chu and Sister Yun. She had been worrying about them ever since meeting Zhao Chu Chu, but Buffon simply smiled, telling her that her happiness was enough. The next morning arrived quickly, and as they stood outside, he told them to head back, estimating he would only be gone for a day or two. We see him hailing a taxi bound for the airport, turning back one last time to tell Shun Yuchu not to worry. Yuchu nodded, though her eyes betrayed a lingering reluctance to see him go, quite ironic, considering how much she had wanted to escape him before. It was truly unexpected how much she would miss him after only a few days. He, however, told her to stay strong during his short absence. He joked that they were making it feel like a life and death parting before hardening his heart, turning away, and sliding into the taxi as it pulled away. As the 2 figures in the rearview mirror grew smaller, he closed his eyes, feeling a strange, indescribable emotion swirling in his chest. 3 hours later, he stepped off the plane and immediately felt the sweltering energy of Modu, which was far more crowded than Jiangqing. Following the surging tide of people, he navigated the terminal with difficulty until he finally reached exit 5 and allowed himself a sigh of relief. Standing before the exit, he scanned the sea of people holding up signs, searching for his own name among the crowd. He had arranged a time with Li Xia beforehand, and she was supposed to be waiting right there at the exit to pick him up. There were so many fans waiting for celebrities that it took him a while to finally spot a sophisticated woman dressed in a professional suit. She was holding a sign with the name Buffon clearly visible, so he quickly walked up and waved to her, asking if she was managerly. He introduced himself as Buffon, though his real name was Lu Fan, and apologized for the wait, while Li Xia observed him closely. A flash of surprise crossed her eyes, though she masked it well. She had known he was young, but this was unexpected. He looked like a fresh university graduate, possessing a face that, to be honest, was perfectly suited for stardom. Li Xia felt a twinge of regret that she wasn't signing him instead, but she simply introduced herself and noted the heavy crowds. She suggested heading to the underground parking since it was lunchtime, proposing they find a place to eat before discussing business. He nodded and walked side by side with her. It was clear that Li Xia was a seasoned professional in the corporate world. As they walked, she skillfully kept the conversation flowing, assuming a young man like him might be awkward or shy. However, she soon discovered he could keep up with any topic, speaking with a confidence that was quite unlike other youths his age. This caused Li Xia to view him with even greater respect. Talented people, it seemed, could thrive anywhere they went. He had no idea she was re-evaluating him so highly, and if he did, he likely would have found it quite amusing. After all, with the memories of 2 lifetimes, he was effectively 50 years old. If he lacked basic social skills now, he'd be in trouble. As they got into the car, we see him watching the bustling city of Modu while Li Xia pointed out the local landmarks. They soon arrived at a specialty restaurant, and while waiting for their food, Li Xia finally turned the conversation toward business. Addressing him as Mr. Liu, she asked about the person he was recommending, whether they were a newcomer or a professional singer. He asked if she had heard of Shin Yuchu, explaining that she was a former singer now looking to make a comeback. His expression turned serious as they got down to brass tacks, while Li Xia knit her brows in deep thought. She remembered Yochu's talent from a popular show 2 years ago, but her concerns stemmed from a different matter entirely. Back then, Yuchu had been forced out of the industry due to a public romance, and the man involved was the problem. He was reportedly a useless, pretty boy type, which made the situation difficult to handle. Li Xia paused to consider her next move. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear and looked at him intently, admitting she knew Yuchu but wondered about their connection. When she asked if he knew why Yuchu had left the industry, Lu Fan looked her in the eye and calmly replied that she was his wife. Even a seasoned professional like Li Xia couldn't hide her shock at that answer. The word wife seemed to catch her completely off guard. She wondered if he was the pretty boy from the rumors, or if Yuchu had perhaps divorced that man and found someone new. Seeing her expression, Lu Fan guessed her thoughts and gave a bitter smile, confirming he was indeed the man from the scandal. He was the one she had left the industry with when their romance was exposed, leaving Li Xia momentarily speechless. She had heard of Yochu's talent, of course, but she had never paid attention to the idol group types who relied solely on their looks. Now, we see her beginning to doubt if those 2 incredible songs were actually written by him at all. Noticing her hesitation, he asked if it was truly that difficult for her company to sign her, offering to find another way if necessary. He clarified that his request wasn't just for a simple signing. He wanted her to have the very best resources and complete freedom. The contract couldn't be restrictive, as he believed the entire matter ultimately came down to a question of mutual benefit. He expressed his belief that with his help, Fancheng Entertainment could reach new heights, and urged her to consider the offer carefully. After saying his piece, he took a calm sip of water while Li Xia's expression grew heavy with the weight of the decision. She pointed out that they hadn't collaborated yet, and 2 songs alone weren't enough to justify such a massive investment. While she respected Yochu's vocal ability, she noted that the entertainment industry required far more than just a good voice. Signing her for a comeback was one thing, but providing top-tier resources and total freedom was a contract they simply didn't offer. She told him they would need to discuss it further, as this was no small matter, though her tone suggested a polite rejection. Despite her indirectness, it was clear she thought the deal was impossible, but Lu Fan remained firm in his stance. He told her they could deliberate, but promised that if they agreed, he would provide songs or even scripts of any genre whenever needed. He truly hoped for a successful partnership, reminding her that they had invited him here specifically to test his capabilities. "I'm already here, so why not make a decision after seeing what I can do?" he said calmly, looking completely composed. Li Xia gave him a long, searching look. She had never met someone quite this confident, or perhaps this was just the legendary pretty boy charm. The world can be foolish, but in the end, Li Xia finished her meal and left in a hurry to consult with her company. Before leaving, she handed him a room card and told him to wait for her news. A little later, he arrived at the hotel room. After a quick wash, he lay on the bed and began to think. If Fancheng didn't work out, he would simply find another company. And if none of them were suitable, he figured he could just work a bit harder, earn more money, and start his own agency. He could just take Shin Yuchu and grow their own brand, completely unaware that his mindset was shifting, which, naturally, was quite a change. He had started out wanting to be a lazy bystander, but now he was running around for Yuchu after only a short time together. We see him becoming more considerate of them, unconsciously integrating himself into this little family. Li Xia's call finally came at 3 in the afternoon, informing him that she had already arrived downstairs. She told him he needed to accompany her to the Fanqing building. Without a word, he went down to meet her. The Fanqing Entertainment headquarters was located in the most prosperous district of the capital. An entire skyscraper belonged to the Fanqing Empire, and at this moment, we find ourselves on the 18th floor. Chairman Li Tian, HR Director Zhang Hao, and several other managers of Fanqing Entertainment were all gathered there. Zhang Hao's expression was sour as he told the chairman that while he respected the vice director's skills, this was going too far. He felt she was placing far too much importance on this Lu Fan, a former nobody artist who was now making ridiculous demands. He felt they were simply wasting their time, but Li Tian just waved a hand with a kind, gentle smile on his face. Shouldn't we give young people a chance? He asked, suggesting they test his talent first. If he failed, his daughter wouldn't complain. Seeing the chairman's amiable facade, Zhang Hao could only swallow his anger, though he was secretly grumbling inside. He knew it was only because she was the chairman's daughter. Seeing Zhang Hao pouting like a victim, Li Tian just smiled again. As the company chairman, Li Tian naturally wouldn't just agree to whatever his daughter said. In reality, he had already heard those two songs. He could only describe them as perfect, though he felt no need to explain his reasoning to Zhang Hao. As for whether the songs were truly original, he figured they would soon find out if the young man was the real deal or just a show-off. Li Xia led Lu Fan into the reception hall, where right from the entrance, we see him passing several of the world's most famous stars. Each was a leader in their respective field. It was clear why this was one of the big three agencies, given such luxury. The sheer scale of the place gave off an undeniable sense of prestige as they finally stepped into the meeting room. Immediately, Lu Fan felt the weight of every gaze in the room turning toward him, their eyes filled with various shades of scrutiny. He sat down in the guest's seat with natural ease, remaining completely unfazed by the group of executives and their indifferent expressions. Deep down, Li Tian couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for such a young man. To remain so composed in this environment made a great first impression. The chairman decided it was time to begin the proceedings. He addressed Lu Fan, explaining that while they could sign Xin Yuchu, the demand for a completely free contract was a bit much. They were willing to provide top-tier resources, but a contract without restrictions was something they simply couldn't offer. Li Tian asked if he understood the position. Lu Fan nodded, simply asking how long the proposed contract would last. With a chuckle, Li Tian looked him in the eye and proposed 5 years, promising to cultivate Yuchu with their best resources. He claimed they wouldn't limit her choice of songs or activities, but Lu Fan's brow furrowed, unafraid to meet the chairman's gaze. He told them 5 years was far too long, expressing total confidence that his talent combined with their resources would yield results much faster. He was certain she would be a top star within a year, perhaps even less, so he would only agree to a 2-year deal. He argued that the remaining time would be enough to bring the company massive profits, and they wouldn't even have to worry about her songs. Furthermore, he offered to write songs for Fanqing for free, though in limited quantities, a bold claim, to be sure. A top star in 1 year? Are you dreaming? Interrupted the man sitting next to Li Xia, unable to stay silent any longer. The balding man let out a mocking sneer, his eyes filled with disdain as he spoke, but Lu Fan didn't even give him a second glance. Instead, he kept his eyes fixed on Li Tian, who narrowed his own gaze while his fingers tapped rhythmically on the table, a smile spreading across his face. He noted that confidence is a fine quality in a young man and conceded that a 2-year deal wasn't impossible, provided Lu Fan could prove his worth. The chairman explained that while they were there to discuss a partnership, the government had recently launched a national campaign requiring every agency to participate. Only one song would be selected for the campaign, and Li Tian wanted that spot. Lu Fan simply nodded, confident in his own abilities. Deep down, he knew this was exactly why he had come, as Li Tian directed him to coordinate the specific details with Vice Minister Li. Li Tian smiled gently, stating he would wait for the good news, promising that the contract would be signed the moment the song was approved. With the initial terms settled, Lu Fan finally relaxed, standing up to shake hands with Li Tian to seal their temporary understanding. As he left the hall with Li Xia, she couldn't help but feel a bit stunned that her father had actually entertained such an outrageous proposal. However, this official event was undeniably important. The company that secured the winning song would earn significant favor from the authorities. The benefits of such a win went without saying, and as Li Xia looked at Lu Fan, her gaze was filled with a mix of conflicting emotions. She truly hoped he would take the world by storm, proving her instincts right and silencing the inevitable office gossip once and for all. She handed him the details, noting he had only 3 days to create something, which, to be honest, was a nearly impossible deadline. "I hope you get your wish," she said, pulling a folder from her desk, "and I hope our collaboration is a success." We see Lu Fan open the folder, where his eyes immediately land on a bold, striking title, Ordinary Heroes. At the sight of those words, his expression turned uncharacteristically solemn as he began to read through the documents in the quiet office. The only sound was the rustling of paper. It was the most serious he had looked since arriving in this world. He flipped the page to find several photographs. The first showed doctors and nurses in heavy protective gear, exhausted but resolute. The second featured 3 firefighters standing before a fire they had just extinguished, followed by a shot of soldiers whose faces remained hidden. The final photo showed a crumbling classroom where a teacher was desperately shielding a child, handing them off to safety. Behind that teacher, there was no one left to save. He was the last one. Lu Fan carefully organized the documents one by one after reading them. He took a deep breath as he put them away, and it was then that Li Xia finally broke the heavy silence of the office, asking what he thought. She asked if he could really do it, reminding him he had only 3 days before Huaying closed the selection. Lu Fan simply gave a firm nod. He told her not to worry and promised a satisfying answer within 3 days. With that, he gathered his things and prepared to leave. Standing up, he asked her to prepare some music manuscript paper so he could study at the hotel. Naturally, she offered to drive him back. He didn't waste a second, knowing that creating a masterpiece in 3 days was a daunting task. By 9 o'clock that evening, he was ready. After a quick shower, we see him sit at the desk, spreading the manuscript paper out and holding his pen in silent contemplation. He thought for a long time before finally deciding on the perfect choice, ordinary being. The next morning, he ate a quick breakfast. Without notifying Li Xia, he took a taxi to Star Entertainment alone. Inside, Li Xia was still buried in her morning workload. She was utterly shocked by his sudden visit, exclaiming that he only had 3 days and should be using every second to write. Lu Fan just smiled and told her it was already finished. Under her gaze of pure disbelief, he calmly handed her the manuscript paper. He suggested she take a look, casually mentioning he thought it would work. Li Xia stared at him as if he were some kind of monster. For once, her professional composure slipped. She wondered if he was joking, doubting anyone could write a quality song in a single night. Frowning, Li Xia took the paper. Just yesterday, she had thought this young man was remarkably steady and talented. To be honest, she felt let down. She felt as though he was making a mockery of the project, but she decided to see exactly what he had managed to produce overnight. Li Xia turned her gaze to the manuscript. When she saw the title, she remained calm, but as she continued, her expression began to shift. As she slowly read through the lyrics, she was completely stunned. They were divine. Every line spoke of the ordinary, yet felt like anything but. The word hero wasn't mentioned once in the entire piece, and yet every single sentence screamed of heroism. The lyrics hit the theme perfectly. Unable to wait another second, Li Xia quickly scanned the musical composition itself. She suddenly looked up at him, her eyes shining with excitement. She asked if he truly wrote this in one night. He just rubbed his nose and asked, "Who else?" He told her he'd stayed up all night to finish it, asking if the song would work. Li Xia's eyes only grew brighter as she listened. She stared at him, telling him he was truly incredible and that her choice had been right. Then, she asked if he could sing it for her. She wanted to hear the actual effect of the piece. Lu Fan nodded and closed his eyes, taking a moment to gather his emotions before beginning. He began to sing, his voice carrying the melody of a day far away. When he finished, Li Xia remained completely immersed in the song. She was unable to pull herself away until he coughed twice. Startled, she snapped back to reality and hurriedly wiped the tears from her face. Her eyes were shining so brightly that he felt almost embarrassed to look, so he simply asked, with a hint of uncertainty, if it was okay. It was more than okay. Suddenly, the office door swung open as a voice exclaimed that young Lu Fan had delivered an incredible surprise. We see Li Tian walking in while clapping his hands, his face clearly showing how genuinely impressed he was by what he'd heard. Behind him followed Zhang Hao, the head of human resources, who looked utterly shocked and could hardly believe his own ears. He wondered how a song this perfect could be written so quickly. Li Xia, however, turned to her father and asked why he hadn't knocked. Seeing her father, Li Xia looked a bit flustered. She secretly wiped away the remaining traces of tears from her cheeks once more. She scolded Li Tian with a look of dissatisfaction, but he showed no sign of regret, continuing to smile warmly at the scene. However, the way he looked at his precious daughter was a bit strange. It had been a very long time since he had seen her act this way. He noted that if he hadn't come in, he wouldn't have known Lu Fan had written such a masterpiece. To be honest, he wasn't about to miss it. Lu Fan was a bit speechless at how quickly his title had changed from Mr. Lu to Young Friend Lu. Businessmen, it seemed, were all the same. To them, anyone who brings profit is family. Lu Fan simply replied that as long as Chairman Li was satisfied, that was all that mattered. Li Tian declared that if Huaying selected this song, they would immediately sign the contract with Shen Yuqiu. Yes, just like that. He suggested they sign a preliminary cooperation agreement now, just so Lu Fan wouldn't have to worry about any potential discomfort later. Li Tian nodded with a smile, and Lu Fan finally breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that, for the most part, the deal was as good as done. The group signed the agreement on the spot. As long as the song was chosen, the partnership he had discussed with Star Entertainment would proceed. The partnership was set to begin immediately. Once the signing was complete, Lu Fan turned to Li Tian to take his leave, noting that since the matter was settled, he would be heading out first. Li Tian wished for a pleasant future cooperation, and Lu Fan nodded, holding the agreement as he turned toward the door. Seeing him prepare to leave, Li Xia suddenly offered to walk him out. We noticed that for the last few moments, she had been avoiding his gaze entirely. It seemed she felt a bit of shame for her earlier behavior, having acted like a starstruck fan in front of everyone. To be honest, it was quite a change for her. For a woman of her composed nature, it was a rare sight. But now that he was leaving, one could see a hint of inexplicable reluctance in her expression. Her father, however, reminded her that she still had unfinished work. He pointed out that Lu Fan wasn't a child and didn't need an escort for every move. Before Lu Fan could even turn his head to respond, Li Tian had already interjected with a firm tone, effectively cutting off his daughter's offer. Seeing the situation, Lu Fan simply gave Li Xia a grateful smile and thanked her for the kind gesture, saying he could easily catch a taxi back himself. With that, he turned and walked out of the office, gently closing the door behind him before making his way out of the building with long strides. Inside the office, Li Xia looked like a kitten on the verge of a temper tantrum, her frustration visible to anyone brave enough to look. Zhang Hao, sensing the tension, suddenly felt his hair stand on end. He swallowed hard and hurriedly announced that he had urgent work to handle before fleeing. Without waiting for Li Tian to speak, Zhang Hao vanished through the door and shut it tight. Only once he was safely outside did he stop to breathe. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Meanwhile, Li Tian watched his daughter. He wasn't angry, but his voice carried a heavy, earnest weight. He told her she wasn't a child anymore and should find a partner. He admitted Lu Fan was impressive, but reminded her that the man already had a wife. He added that, as far as he knew, Lu Fan even had a daughter. Li Xia fell silent for a moment before replying coldly that she was well aware of that. Li Tian told her it was good she knew, then suddenly remembered he also had work to do. He hurried out, but just as he reached the hallway, he popped his head back in to remind her she was 26 and truly needed to find someone. Her only response was a sharp command for him to get out. He beat a hasty retreat, promising not to nag anymore. A little later, back at the hotel, Lu Fan hadn't even finished picking out a flight ticket yet. When Li Xia's name flashed on his phone, she apologized for her father's tone earlier, saying she felt the need to say sorry on his behalf. Her voice over the phone was cold, as if she were still harboring a grudge against someone. Lu Fan was quite surprised by the sudden call. To be honest, Lu Fan hadn't actually taken the matter to heart at all. He understood Li Xia's meaning, having seen all sorts of people in the capital markets. He was already well aware of how things worked. He told her he didn't feel anything was wrong and she shouldn't worry. Hearing this, we see that Li Xia's tone softened slightly as she replied it was good, he didn't mind, before asking if he was on his way back to the hotel. He informed her he had already arrived and was preparing to pack his things and book a flight back to Jiangqing. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Li Xia's voice came through again, explaining the situation. She suggested that Lu Fan should wait another 2 days, as Huaying might still need his assistance if his lyrics were selected. Since he had written the lyrics himself, he naturally had the deepest understanding of the song. Upon hearing Li Xia's words, his plans to return home fell through, leaving him feeling a bit empty. He agreed to stay a few more days, asking her to notify him when the time came. After hanging up, he set his phone down with a hint of regret. Turning to look at the scenery flying past the window, he found himself missing the little one at home, thinking of Wanwan. A smile spread across his face without him even realizing it. And then, as if they shared a telepathic connection, Shin Yochu's call came in at that exact moment. He picked up, and immediately, Wanwan's voice came rushing through. She asked if it was her father. Even without seeing her, a warm, fatherly smile lit up his face as he listened to the little girl. He responded that it was indeed him, asking if she missed her daddy. She said she did, adding that Mama wanted to know when he was coming back. Back at home, we see Wanwan holding the phone with both hands, snuggled in Shin Yochu's arms as she spoke sweetly. Shin Yochu's face instantly turned a shade of crimson, and she gave the little one a helpless, sidelong glance. After all, it was the child who had insisted on calling, yet now she was dragging her mother into it. Lu Fan then asked when she wanted him back. He smiled to himself, guessing that the little one simply wanted him home, but was using Shin Yochu as an excuse. Wanwan sounded clearly displeased upon hearing his delay, whimpering softly over the phone while Lu Fan's lips curled into a gentle smile. Lu Fan shifted into a more comfortable position, lying on the bed as he asked if Wanwan had eaten well today. Upon hearing this, the little girl immediately glanced up at her mother. Then, like a tiny thief keeping a secret, she lowered her head and whispered that she had. But, she added with a very serious tone, she much preferred the meals her father cooked. Shin Yuchu, who was eavesdropping nearby, could only laugh in frustration. It seemed the little one was already an expert at making complaints. She was essentially implying her mother's cooking wasn't up to par. Then, Shin Yuchu heard Lu Fan's loud laughter erupting from the other end. In an instant, Shin Yochu's face turned even redder. She snatched the phone away, declaring that the chat with Papa was over for today. Lu Fan tried to protest, saying it wasn't him asking the questions, before laughing and asking if everything was alright at home. This only made Shin Yuchu feel more annoyed, sensing he was holding back a laugh. After all, he had only been gone for a single day. She told him nothing could have happened in such a short time, then announced she was hanging up to make lunch. He tried to stop her, but Shin Yuchu didn't give him the chance and ended the call. Her face was burning hot, a perfectly natural reaction to being teased. She feared that if they kept talking, she might actually want to hit someone. Seeing Wanwan staring regretfully at the phone, Shun Yuchu decided that for lunch, they would be having the little green vegetables Wanwan disliked most. Yes, of course, children shouldn't be picky eaters. We see Lu Fan listening to the dial tone, feeling a bit disappointed but still wearing a smile. To be honest, this was the first time he had seen Shin Yuchu show such a spark of personality. Previously, she had always given off a somewhat repressed, heavy vibe. He used to think of her as someone lacking her own soul, but now, that situation was slowly improving. She was becoming herself again, which was a wonderful thing. However, the wait was long, and in a few days, August would arrive. Lu Fan had already spent 2 days in the Magic City. During this time, he spoke with Li Xia on the phone several times. The distance between them began to fade. At the very least, Li Xia stopped calling him sir with every sentence, which had made him feel quite awkward. He continued his routine of early morning runs, and everything seemed calm and peaceful. There was still no news from Huaying, so he could only wait. Then, on the evening of the 3rd day, suddenly, Lu Fan received a call from a number that felt both strange and familiar. A voice on the other end asked if it was old Lu, identifying himself as Chen Shun. Hearing this, we see him quickly sorting through his memories. This was the original owner's best friend from university, a man nicknamed the Madman. It had been a long time. Recalling Chen Shun's character and personality from those memories, Lu Fan couldn't help but smile as he spoke. Having a sincere friend seemed like a rather nice change of pace. Chen Shin immediately began scolding him, asking what happened after he got married. He complained that Lu Fan hadn't been answering calls or replying to messages, jokingly asking if he had started looking down on his old brothers. However, the underlying tone of genuine concern made Lu Fan's heart feel warm. It was a shame that after the original owner married, he had been so busy sucking up to Chen Shui and Yi Tian that he ignored his best friend. Lu Fan apologized, admitting he had been wrong. He asked Chen Shun to be the bigger man and forgive him this once, promising to treat him to dinner as an apology when they finally met. Internally, he cursed the original owner once again. To be honest, the man had been a fool who couldn't tell a true friend from a ghost. Chen Shun laughed and agreed to talk more next time before hanging up, but the silence didn't last long, as Li Xia called almost immediately. His song had been selected by Huaying. According to Li Xia, the people there had spotted it instantly among thousands of submissions. Li Xia's voice was thick with excitement. By the time she made the call, she had already arrived at the entrance of his hotel. She explained that Huaying was preparing to film a music video and needed him, the songwriter, to provide some on-site guidance. When Lu Fan came downstairs, Li Xia tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, her eyes sparkling as she looked at him. He simply rubbed his nose. Choosing to ignore her gaze, he suggested they leave immediately, noting that if they finished early, they might still make it back for lunch. Without another word, he climbed into the back seat. Apparently, the perfectly spacious front passenger seat wasn't to his liking today. Li Xia mentioned that the director in charge of the MV had been full of praise for him. She then asked if he had any specific thoughts regarding the vision for the music video or the lead singer who would be performing it. There wasn't a trace of nerves on his face. Li Xia glanced at him through the rearview mirror and, seeing his absolute calm, dropped the subject. 2 hours later, the car pulled into the parking lot in front of a massive office building, and our story moved to the next stage. We see the two of them walking into the building side by side. It seems Li Xia had already made an appointment, because as soon as they enter, a group of people immediately rushes forward to greet them. One of them asks Grandpa Lin why he came down personally, fearing a scolding from their father. Li Xia steps forward quickly, taking the old man's hand and acting quite spoiled. To be honest, this sudden display of affection catches Lu Fan off guard. Seeing the usually composed Li Xia acting like a child is quite the sight. The old man, however, simply beams with doting affection. He tells her to stop the act, joking that her father wouldn't dare scold her. For a rare moment, we see Li Xia actually blush. She quickly turns the conversation back to business. The old man turns his gaze to Lu Fan, noting that true talent really does appear at a young age. Lu Fan politely nods to the elder, introducing himself and thanking him for the kind words, which, in this industry, is always a good start. The old man is impressed by his manners. He introduces himself as Lin Silly, the director in charge of the music video. He suggests that if Lu Fan doesn't mind, he should call him Grandpa Lin, just like Li Xia does. Lu Fan, naturally, accepts the offer. With a faint smile on his face, he agrees. Lin Silly is delighted by the young man's attitude and suggests they head upstairs. The atmosphere shifts as she pulls Lu Fan toward the elevator. She seems to have completely forgotten about introducing the rest of the entourage behind her. Lu Fan is forced to follow her lead, though he makes sure to give a polite nod to the staff members as they ascend to the 20th floor. The moment they step out, Lin Silly pulls him straight into the recording studio. She mentions that according to Li Xia, he has quite a voice. She asks if he would mind singing for them, as they haven't heard the song yet and haven't chosen a lead singer. Lu Fan simply nods. When asked if he needs a full arrangement, he chooses the piano, deciding that a simple accompaniment is all this song requires. As the session begins, Lin Silly becomes noticeably more serious. She leaves Lu Fan alone in the booth and leads everyone else to the observation room. The staff switches on the microphones while the group of executives waits with bated breath. Lu Fan steps inside the quiet space. He sits down and takes a moment to gather his emotions. When he enters his work mode, his entire demeanor becomes incredibly focused. From the outside, the change in his expression is visible to everyone. Watching this, Lin Silly nods in quiet approval. This, she realizes, is what a pure musician looks like. Inside the booth, he begins to play, and the gentle intro of the piano fills the air. Outside the booth, the entire crowd suddenly holds their breath, their eyes fixed on the interior as the first notes of the piano begin to drift through the air. The song speaks of long journeys, of partings and reunions, and the bittersweet cycle of people coming together and drifting apart. As the final note fades, he takes a deep breath. He takes a moment to steady his emotions before standing up and leaving the studio. Outside, the group is still staring at him in stunned silence until the next moment, when everyone begins to applaud him instinctively. Lin Silly, looking particularly moved, rushes forward to grab his hand with a gaze full of excitement. She tells young Lu that this is exactly the feeling she wanted. In her mind, there is no need to find another lead singer. He is the one. She has a premonition. She believes this song will spark a massive storm of attention online, focusing on the theme of unsung heroes. This, after all, is the exact effect they were hoping for. Those heroes who sacrifice in silence deserve to be heard. Hearing such high praise from the old director, even a seasoned soul like Lu Fan feels a bit overwhelmed. He can't help but blush slightly, yet he shakes his head and looks at Lin Silly with total sincerity. He addresses her as Grandpa Lin, as they had agreed. He explains that he shouldn't be the lead singer because he has a better idea, asking if she would be willing to listen. Lin Silly frowns at this suggestion. She wonders who could possibly be a better singer than the person who actually wrote the lyrics and music. Seeing her obvious reluctance, Lu Fan decides not to keep her in suspense. He quickly shares his vision, explaining to Grandpa Lin that he believes this particular song is actually much better suited for children to sing. He points out that children's voices are clearer and more ethereal, and having the nation's youth sing for the nameless heroes would be far more moving. Upon hearing this explanation, Lin Silly's eyes widen in realization. To be honest, she is starting to think this young man might be a literal genius. She wonders why she hadn't thought of it herself. Children naturally possess a quality that makes people feel an immediate, heartfelt connection. If they sing while the footage she captured plays in the background, it will undoubtedly touch everyone's hearts. It is, quite simply, a brilliant plan. He truly is the talented young man she took him for. Now, Lin Silly's gaze is even more enthusiastic, and even the middle-aged executives behind her are impressed. It is as if a light bulb has suddenly gone off for all of them. They all turn to look at Lu Fan with a newfound sense of disbelief and respect. They had selected these clips from thousands of hours of footage to match the song's length, yet they had been unable to settle on the right lead singer. And yet, he solved the problem with a single sentence. She calls him a prodigy and asks if he has any interest in coming to work for them at Hawaiian. She assures him that his talent would never be wasted there. It's clear that Lin Silly has developed a deep appreciation for his rare abilities. She truly wants to bring him into her inner circle, feeling that leaving a talent like his out in the wild would be a complete waste. But Lu Fan quickly interjects, calling her Grandpa Lin. He insists he is just a laid-back soul and is perfectly content just to have helped them this time. He waves his hands in a polite refusal, leaving Lin Silly momentarily speechless. She wonders if all laid-back people are this capable nowadays. However, she doesn't push the matter. After all, he is right here, and it isn't as if he can truly run away. She tells herself she will simply find him again when the next opportunity arises. By the time we see him finally leaving the Hawaiian building, it is already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. His mind feels completely drained after the meeting. It turns out that when those professionals start discussing work, every single one of them becomes incredibly intense. They were bordering on being total workaholics. In the end, it took Li Xia acting a bit spoiled and insisting they go eat lunch for the meeting to finally break. Only then are the two of them able to escape. On the way, she teases him, suggesting he should treat her to a meal now that he's set to make a fortune with Hawaiian. Li Xia shows a rare, playful side, sticking her tongue out as she jokes with him. To be honest, this mature older sister figure is starting to lose her serious edge. He raises an eyebrow, asking if a wealthy woman like her really has the heart to fleece a common citizen like him. It's a fair question, really. Calling him stingy, Li Xia rolls her eyes and hops into the car with a playful pout. He just smiles to himself and quickly follows her lead. The better he gets to know her, the more he realizes she has a wonderful personality. That sense of intimidation he felt when they first met has completely vanished. She is a classic case of a cold exterior with a warm heart. Ultimately, he doesn't escape the bill, and Li Xia happily enjoys a lavish feast at his expense. After their meal, Li Xia drives him to Fancheng Entertainment. This visit is for the contract, which was, we should remember, his original goal all along. Specifically, it is the signing contract for Shen Yuqiu. As the two of them step into the elevator, he suddenly notices something feels a bit off. Li Xia's mood seems to have dipped. She appears uncharacteristically hesitant. It's strange, considering she just finished a massive free meal. He truly cannot wrap his head around what she is thinking. Women, it seems, are a mystery. The elevator carries them straight to Li Tian's office. The executive has been waiting for quite some time, with the contract already prepared on his desk. He wears that same eternal smile he always has. Watching them enter, he greets young Lu and suggests they have a successful cooperation. He invites him to check the contract for any needed additions. He nods and takes a seat at the desk to review the document. It is a standard, formal contract prepared in triplicate, just as one would expect. As soon as Shin Yuchu signs it, it will take effect immediately. The terms are exactly as they had previously discussed, with no hidden surprises. Fancheng Entertainment is offering Shin Yuchu their top-tier resources and the greatest possible degree of freedom. In short, a dream deal. Shin Yuchu will be free to do exactly as she pleases without any coercion, which is precisely what Lu Fan wanted to see. The contract spans 2 years, with any renewal left entirely to her discretion. Having finished his review, he sets the document down. He tucks the papers away, stands up, and shakes hands with Li Tian, thanking the chairman for a successful and pleasant cooperation. Seeing such fair terms, his opinion of Li Tian improves significantly. At least this man isn't like those other cold-hearted capitalists. There are no traps hidden in these pages. Li Tian simply smiles, noting that talent and resources are a natural match. It is a matter of mutual benefit, really. Regarding the songs Lu Fan promised to write, Li Tian sees no need for a separate contract. He trusts Lu Fan's character completely, standing up to return the handshake. He listens as the young man reaffirms his commitment. However, Lu Fan makes his own conditions clear. He will only write the title tracks and nothing less. Furthermore, he chooses who he writes for based on his own judgment. He won't be writing for just any random person who asks. He has a temper, but he has the talent to back it up, a combination that only makes Li Tian respect him more. Yet, as the chairman glances at his daughter, he can't help but let out a secret, heavy sigh of regret. He wonders, quite honestly, why such a promising young man had to go and get married so early in life. Later, Li Xia drives him all the way to the hotel entrance but doesn't follow him inside. Ever since they entered Fancheng, her mood has shifted. She seems rather downcast as she tells him she won't be seeing him off at the airport. He'll have to manage that journey alone. Claiming she has errands to run, she prepares to leave. He simply waves a hand, wishing her a safe drive before heading into the hotel. Watching his retreating back, Li Xia feels a sudden, inexplicable flash of anger before hitting the gas and speeding away. Finally, he can go home. Thinking of his little treasure, he packs his bags, checks out, and hails a taxi in one fluid motion. By 6 o'clock that evening, laden with gifts, we see him walking back into his familiar, slightly worn-down neighborhood. His steps grow lighter with every meter until he finally pushes open the long-awaited door, finding the living room perfectly quiet. It seems Shin Yuchu and Wanwan aren't home. Not seeing the faces he missed immediately, he feels a faint, lingering sense of disappointment. However, a moment later, the bedroom door swings open, and Shin Yuchu walks out, rubbing her sleepy eyes with a soft, groggy murmur. The second she sees him, she snaps wide awake, her eyes widening in surprise. She is currently wearing a delicate camisole nightgown. One of her shoulder straps has slipped down her arm, and her hair is a messy tangle. Shin Yuchu's small, pouting lips give her the look of a sleeping beauty suddenly awakened. They both freeze in place, caught in the soft glow of the afternoon light. They simply stare at each other in silence until a bright, warm smile spreads across Lu Fan's face as he says, "I'm back." A rosy blush slowly creeps across Shin Yuchu's face. She stands there, not knowing what to do with herself, feeling a bit flustered. And yet, a tiny spark of sweetness wells up inside her. She lowers her head and responds softly, not forgetting to instinctively pull the fallen strap back up to her shoulder. "Oh right, this is for you," Lu Fan says, changing the subject. He suddenly pulls a bouquet of lavender from behind his back, explaining he saw someone selling them and thought they smelled lovely. He claims he just bought them on a whim. Shin Yuchu purses her lips and steps forward to gently take the lavender from his hands. Her face is now completely flushed. After all, this is the very first bouquet of flowers he has ever given her. Lavender means devotion and hope. She loves them dearly. "Thank you," she whispers, gathering her courage to look him in the eye, her long eyelashes fluttering softly. "Have you eaten yet?" he asks with a relaxed smile. When she says no, he decides he will be the one to cook dinner tonight. He tells her to go wake Wanwan. Shin Yuchu originally intended to cook herself, thinking he must be exhausted after traveling all day. But seeing the persistence in his eyes, and knowing his cooking is honestly much better than hers, she eventually gives a small nod. "I'll go get Wanwan. She'll be so happy to know you're back. She's been asking about you constantly these past 2 days. As she speaks, Shin Yuchu turns back toward the master bedroom, though this time, she leaves the door wide open behind her. Peering inside, we see little Wanwan sprawled out across the bed, limbs pointing in every direction, sleeping soundly through it all. Shin Yuchu picks the little one up with gentle hands, and the child doesn't even stir as she is carried out to see Lu Fan. She kisses the little girl's cheek and whispers softly into her ear, "Wanwan, wake up, Daddy is home." Suddenly, Wanwan stirs. She slowly opens those adorable, sleepy eyes and looks around the room with a confused gaze. Then, the little one's eyes suddenly light up, and she waves her short little arms toward Lu Fan, shouting, "It's Daddy." She cries out for a hug, telling him how much she missed him, clinging to him like a little koala the moment he picks her up. She wraps her arms around his neck and refuses to let go, hanging there even as he heads into the kitchen to start dinner. Eventually, Shin Yuchu has to put on a stern face and use the new toys he bought as a bribe to finally detach the little girl. Once placed on the sofa, Wanwan plays with her toys, though her big eyes constantly drift back toward the kitchen. It is as if she's terrified his figure might vanish again. Soon, the meal is ready, and the family gathers warmly together. As they sit at the table, Shin Yuchu looks down to see Wanwan already wielding her tiny chopsticks, slurping up her food. A long noodle disappears into her mouth in an instant, and her eyes crinkle into happy little crescents. Watching her eat, one might think she hadn't been fed in days, leaving Shin Yuchu feeling both annoyed and helpless. Admitting defeat is all she can do, and she finds herself eating faster too, which is strange, considering their usual habits. It seems that when it's just the two of them, they lack this appetite, but his presence allows them to truly relax. As she eats, Shin Yuchu's mind wanders. She reflects on how terrifying it is that they once wanted to be far away from this man. In such a short time, his care has completely changed their world, leaving only the sound of slurping at the dinner table. By the time Shin Yuchu finishes her meal, she realizes that both Lu Fan and Wanwan have long since finished theirs. She notices him watching her with a steady gaze, causing her pretty face to flush a deep crimson once again. She quickly wipes her mouth and stands up to hide her embarrassment, gathering the dishes to go wash them. She stacks his bowl with the others and makes a hasty retreat toward the kitchen, telling him to spend time with Wanwan. Watching Shin Yuchu drift toward the kitchen like a gust of wind, Lu Fan shakes his head. He wasn't going to fight her for the chores. "Daddy, come play blocks with Wanwan." We hear her cry as she hops off her stool and drags Lu Fan toward the sofa. With a bit of help, the blocks soon take the shape of a tiny house, accompanied by her sweet, innocent laughter. Lu Fan takes this chance to ask how things have been at home, and the little one is more than happy to spill every secret, especially about Shin Yuchu. It turns out the little one is quite the informant, revealing to Lu Fan that her mother misses him just as much. She mentions seeing her mom secretly smiling while watching videos of him singing, an adorable revelation he definitely wasn't fishing for, or so he claims. The only issue is that Wanwan is being quite loud, completely unaware that Shin Yuchu has already marched out of the kitchen. At this moment, Shin Yuchu's face is as red as a ripe apple, though her eyes carry a playful, icy warning. The little girl immediately dives into Lu Fan's arms for protection, chanting that if she can't see her mother can't see her. Shin Yuchu can't help but chuckle as she reaches out to pat the little girl's bottom, which is still sticking out from Lu Fan's arm. She glares at Lu Fan's smirking face, insisting it's all nonsense, only for Wanwan to shout that mommy is a liar. "Liars aren't good children," the little one muffledly protests, her face still buried deep in her father's chest. Seeing that Shin Yuchu is about to snap, Lu Fan immediately raises his hands in surrender, leaving the little one completely exposed. "I believe you," he says, wisely choosing the path of least resistance as Shin Yuchu scoops up the child to tease her. Wanwan's eyes sparkle with disbelief as she reaches out toward her father, who is now sitting there looking perfectly innocent. He had sold her out to her mother in a heartbeat, a small sacrifice, he tells himself, for the sake of family harmony. After a bit of family chaos, poor Wanwan is left to suffer alone, pouting as she returns to building her blocks by herself. Lu Fan gives her head a gentle pat before standing up to retrieve a paper envelope from his suitcase. He places it before Shin Yuchu, announcing the mission is complete. It's the official contract from Fancheng Entertainment. Shin Yuchu gazes at his serious face, her fluttering eyelashes betraying just how much this moment means to her. He had been gone for only a few days, yet he truly returned with a future for her. She quietly lowers her head. She picks up the envelope and begins flipping through the contract, her hands starting to tremble slightly as she reaches the final page. It is the kind of agreement she never even dared to dream of, top-tier benefits and a level of creative freedom that seems almost impossible. Even if she had never left the industry and kept singing until now, she likely would never have secured a contract quite like this one. Shin Yuchu can't fathom how he did it. She wonders what he went through and what he had to sacrifice in just a few days to get this. As she looks at this unimaginable deal, she raises her head to look Lu Fan directly in the eye, her gaze shimmering with unshed tears. She purses her lips, simply staring at him while he maintains that same gentle, effortless smile we've come to expect. It's as if all of this was no trouble at all, and after a long silence, Shin Yuchu finally speaks his name softly, Lu Fan. She tells him that, actually, she doesn't need to sing. Her voice is small, but her resolve is surprisingly firm and without hesitation. Lu Fan frowns in confusion. He knows she loves to sing and has always wanted this, so he can't quite grasp what she means now. He wonders what is going through her mind, asking her why she's backing down now that the opportunity she always wanted is finally here. His tone sharpens just a bit, marking the very first time since his arrival that he has spoken to her with such intensity. Having spent his previous life as a perpetual bachelor, he naturally doesn't understand the chaotic mess of emotions swirling inside Shin Yuchu. She suddenly feels that living just like this is enough. She fears that pursuing her career will bring changes that ruin their current peace. Her lips tremble as she stares at him, tears beginning to fall one by one, until a moment later, she finally finds her voice. She confesses that she is afraid of the bad things that might change, marking the first time she has been so direct about her fears. Lu Fan is stunned for a moment, but then his worried frown softens into a warm, reassuring smile. With a gentle expression, he picks up a tissue and reaches out to tenderly wipe away the tear stains trailing down her cheeks. He asks her what kind of man she thinks he is, telling her seriously to go forth without worry, no matter what happens. He promises her that nothing will change, noting, with a bit of irony, that he's already prepared himself to be a full-time stay-at-home dad. Shin Yuchu never expected him to say that, let alone reach out to dry her eyes. It had been far too long since she experienced such intimacy. She immediately lowers her head in shyness, her slightly flushed face turning a deep crimson as her chaotic thoughts vanish into thin air. For a moment, we might have thought she was still afraid of the industry's mess, but now the truth is finally clear. Lu Fan realizes that Shun Yuchu is simply afraid of change, a natural feeling for someone who has stayed home for so long. He speaks up again, telling her earnestly that he means it. She can leave Wang Wan to him, and he will take perfect care of her. He reminds her that the contract offers immense freedom, meaning she can return whenever she likes without ever worrying about home. He tells her to just focus on herself while away, but Shin Yuchu isn't listening to a single word he says anymore. Her mind is still stuck on the moment he gently caressed her face, while little Wang Wan watches their interaction from the sofa. The little girl sees her mother's hidden smile as she looks down, while her father continues to chatter on, bless him. Young as she is, she doesn't fully understand, but she knows her mother is happy and her father is still acting worried. Suddenly, she pounces onto Lu Fan's lap, looking up with wide, blinking eyes as a whimsical idea pops into her head. Her little heart is thumping with excitement as she asks, "Is it okay, Daddy?" hoping for an answer he hasn't given yet. When he hesitates, Wang Wan begins her ultimate cuteness attack, rolling around on his lap until he finally swallows hard and turns away. He looks at Shun Yuchu, whose neck is now as red as her face, and tells the girl that they must ask her mother's permission first. Feeling utterly overwhelmed by shyness, Shin Yuchu stands up in a panic and heads for the bathroom, claiming she is simply tired. She announces she needs to wash up for bed and makes a hasty retreat, leaving only Lu Fan and Wang Wan in the living room. The two of them stare at each other, Lu Fan at a total loss, until Wang Wan jumps up and wraps her arms around his neck. She claims her mother already said it was fine as long as he was ready, though Lu Fan wonders if she actually said that at all. He glances at the closed bathroom door, hearing the faint sound of water, and takes a deep breath of the little girl's milky scent. He tries to bolster his courage, telling himself that this is entirely for Wang Wan's sake and definitely not for any other reason. After a long while, Shin Yuchu finally emerges from the bathroom and quietly makes her way back toward the bedroom, passing through the room. She doesn't even cast a single glance toward the sofa as she retreats, leaving Lu Fan to pick up little Wang Wan and head to the bathroom. After helping the little one wash up and freshening up himself, he carries her back out, and this is where his heart truly begins to race. We see his pulse quicken. That short walk from the living room to the master bedroom feels like a journey of 1,000 miles. By the time he finally steps inside, his mind has gone completely blank. After all, 2 lifetimes haven't prepared him for a moment like this. He looks around as if searching for a guide, but Shin Yuchu is already tucked under the covers, appearing to be fast asleep. She is lying on her side facing away, so he can't see her expression, though her flushed, crimson earlobes tell a very different story. He closes the door as softly as possible, yet the faint click makes Shun Yuchu's entire body give a tiny, nervous shudder. Still, she doesn't move, and Lu Fan decides to simply let go of his anxiety. At this point, being nervous is quite useless. With that thought, he feels a bit more at ease as he places Wang Wan in the middle of the bed and sits on the other side. Leaning over the little girl, he begins a bedtime story about Snow White, his gentle voice filling the quiet room. As his words echo softly, Shin Yuchu's eyelashes flutter ever so slightly, and her racing heart begins to steady along with the tale. Eventually, she drifts off without even realizing it, and little Wang Wan follows suit, lulled to sleep by her father's voice. The night grows deep, and once he hears their breathing turn slow and rhythmic, he finally reaches out to turn off the light. He slips under the covers, and as he settles in, he's greeted by the familiar, faint fragrance of the pillow, a scent he finds surprisingly pleasant. It's the first time he's realized just how wonderful a woman's pillow can smell, and holding Wang Wan close, he soon falls into a deep sleep. The night passes in silence until his internal clock wakes him right on time at 6 in the morning, and he instinctively reaches out. He pulls the soft figure in his arms closer, but then he suddenly freezes. Since when did little Wang Wan grow this much? He swallows hard and dares to peek under the blanket, only to realize that the person in his arms isn't the little girl at all. It's Shin Yuchu, and he's completely stunned as to how she ended up there, surrounded by her warmth and that delicate, lingering scent. His composure shatters instantly, and he finds himself leaning down until he is inches away from her face, held there in a trance. He finds himself locked in a fierce internal struggle, but then we see her long eyelashes flutter, and he quickly sits back up in a panic. He quietly withdraws his arm from beneath her neck, and, arching his back, he cautiously slips out of bed and scurries from the bedroom. Once in the bathroom to freshen up, he looks utterly defeated. This morning is proving to be quite the ordeal, though he has no idea of the truth. The moment he steps out of the room, Shin Yuchu actually opens her beautiful eyes and lets out a tiny, soft sigh of relief. She covers her burning face and retreats under the covers, feeling far too embarrassed to be seen. She had actually woken up the moment he sat up. She hadn't realized when she started using his arm as a pillow, and to be honest, she finds the whole situation incredibly mortifying. It wasn't until she felt his breath brushing against her face that panic truly set in, leaving her wondering exactly what he intended to do. Was he going to steal a kiss? Shin Yuchu was scared to death in that moment, yet she didn't dare wake up and face him. She could only continue to feign sleep, feeling lucky that he stopped himself in time. Otherwise, she really wouldn't have known how to face him. Yet, when he finally withdrew and left, she felt a faint, lingering sense of loss, unsure if she was truly ready for what comes next. Her mind is a complete whirlwind, and it takes a long time before she can finally let out a deep, steadying breath from under the covers. She decides to just let things happen naturally, staying tucked away until 8 o'clock when she hears the door open again and finally climbs out of bed. After tidying herself up and leaving the room, she finds that Lu Fan is already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. He offers a somewhat awkward greeting, wishing her a good morning, and Shin Yuchu's own expression is just as strained. She doesn't even raise her eyes to look at him, giving only a soft response before heading into the bathroom, while he tries not to overthink it. He turns back to continue with the meal, but to his surprise, Shin Yuchu finishes washing up quickly and walks straight into the kitchen. She offers to help, her expression now calm as she skillfully takes the bowl from his hands to begin rinsing the rice. He freezes for just a second before recovering, gladly accepting her help as he moves to the side to start washing the vegetables. The two of them move with a quiet, natural rhythm, looking very much like a couple who has lived together for years. 20 minutes later, the golden millet porridge and 2 side dishes are ready, and he finally takes off his apron to wash his hands. He naturally walks over to the bedroom to wake up little Wanwan, who has somehow managed to migrate to the foot of the bed during the night. After the family of 3 enjoys a pleasant breakfast together, Lu Fan turns his attention to Shin Yuchu and mentions something that's been on his mind. He asks if she is scheduled to report to Fanching Entertainment in early August, and Shin Yuchu settles onto the sofa, her clear eyes reflecting her thoughts. She explains that before that, she needs to visit Chu Chu and Sister Yun, knowing they will be overjoyed to hear she is returning to the industry. A genuine smile spreads across Shin Yuchu's face as she speaks. After all, her sudden retirement had weighed heavily on her conscience. She felt she owed it to those two most of all, and now, if not for her own dreams, she felt she had to succeed for their sake. Lu Fan nods while absent-mindedly ruffling Wanwan's hair, his mind already racing through possibilities for the perfect song to give Shin Yuchu. This is to be her grand return, and he is determined to make it spectacular, knowing her vocal range is truly exceptional. Whether it's a sweet melody or a soulful ballad, she can master it all, which, to be honest, makes choosing just one song quite a challenge. After a moment of fruitless thinking, he pivots to another practical matter, suggesting they should go out and buy 2 cars in a few days. He points out that Wanwan starts kindergarten in a month, making a reliable vehicle necessary for the daily commute, but there is more to it. While Fanching Entertainment will provide a professional van for work, he believes she still needs her own car for her personal time. Shin Yuchu considers this and agrees it's a sensible idea, realizing that her days of staying quietly at home are coming to an end. In the past, a car was a luxury she didn't need, but now, facing a busy schedule, the lack of transport would be a genuine inconvenience. However, a flicker of worry crosses her mind regarding their finances, as she knows his recent video earnings were mostly spent on new furniture. Between his recent travels and Wanwan's upcoming school fees, she isn't quite sure how much is actually left in their savings. After a moment of quiet reflection, Shin Yuchu looks up with a trace of concern and suggests they should perhaps just buy 1 car for now. She insists he keep the car for the school runs, while she relies on the company vehicle, suggesting they wait until more money comes in. In her mind, it's better to wait until her new songs and albums start generating actual revenue before making such a large purchase. Yet, this thought brings a new wave of anxiety, as she secretly wonders just how long it will take before she has a song to sing at all. While the contract with Fanching Entertainment offers top-tier resources, it also includes a specific clause regarding creative freedom over her songs. She isn't quite sure how Lu Fan negotiated with the company. They provided everything, yet he didn't ask them to commission any songs for her. After all, she doesn't know many songwriters herself, and as she thinks about this, Shin Yuchu suddenly pauses in realization. She looks over at Lu Fan, who remains perfectly calm, remembering that he seems to know how to write music, even if she isn't sure when he learned. of the two songs on Xiaodo. He even taught one to little Wanwan on the spot, so he naturally understands Shun Youchu's financial worries. He waves his hand dismissively, telling her not to worry about their savings and to simply let the bullets fly for a while, a classic Lu Fan move. He assures her the money will arrive in a few days. On Sunday, the music video for Ordinary is scheduled to go live at exactly 8 in the morning. The project is a co-creation between the Huaying and Bufan accounts, with multiple other departments ready to repost it simultaneously. The lineup is undeniably luxurious, but we know that no matter how grand the promotion, the audience only truly cares about the quality. Only if the quality is high will people buy in and look for the story behind the video. However, a certain saying has been circulating online lately. Produced by Bufan, guaranteed to be a masterpiece. Now, seeing that the lyrics and music for this video are both by Bufan, the hype is real. The public's interest is piqued instantly. This mysterious fellow rarely acts, but when he does, the results are always staggering. And so, viewers begin clicking on the music video one after another, eager to witness what they hope will be a grand spectacle. Even as the music fades and the final frame disappears, Bufan's silhouette never appears. He remains as mysterious as ever, it seems. Yet everyone feels satisfied. The footage and the figures shown in this video have left a deep, lasting impression on the hearts of the viewers. Strangely, long after the video is released, not a single person likes or comments. It's as if the entire audience has collectively vanished. In the Huaying conference room, Lin Silly watches the real-time data with growing confusion, unable to understand what is happening. He wonders why over 100 million people are watching, yet there isn't a single like. Could it be that they don't approve of the video? Feeling a bit dejected, Lin Silly wipes his reddened eyes, finding it difficult to accept this silence. However, in the very next moment, everything changes. The video's data suddenly skyrockets, and the number of likes and comments explodes like a massive flood breaking through a dam. It was impossible to stop. For the first time in history, the data began to rise like a geyser in such a short period. In just a few breaths, the likes surged from 100,000 to 5 million, then 10 million, then 20 million. The platform experienced its first ever comment lag, though even that didn't seem to slow down the momentum in the slightest. The vast wave of netizens had started out simply curious about this new music video released by Huaying. Their expectations rose when they saw Bufan wrote the lyrics, but after watching it fully, they were left deeply moved. Pure empathy was the overwhelming feeling in everyone's heart, and the video shot straight to the top of the trending lists. As it took a firm hold of the #1 spot on the search rankings, a sudden cheer erupted in the Huaying conference room. Lin Silly clenched his fists in excitement, silently watching the data. It turns out the audience wasn't indifferent after all. They simply hadn't had time to process their emotions yet. Half an hour later, the heat hadn't just stayed on one platform. It spread to Weibo, where the trending topics were dominated by the video as netizens discussed it incessantly. We see a random user was the first to notice that Huaying had uploaded a pure audio version of the track. Since it was set to be free, everyone who had seen the video rushed back to the Huaying platform to leave high ratings. They downloaded, favorited, and shared it. Within a single day, the entire entertainment industry in China was shaken to its core. Every entertainment company and individual began silently reposting the video after watching it, a level of popularity others could only envy. They couldn't replicate this success, so they simply tried to ride the wave of hype by associating themselves with the masterpiece. Meanwhile, Shin Yuchu is nestled in Lu Fan's arms, sobbing softly and using his sleeve to wipe away her tears and nose. Her pitiful, aggrieved expression makes his heart ache. It was just a video, after all, yet she seems truly upset. Shin Yuchu finally understands what Lu Fan was busy with these past few days, creating a song of this magnitude. She wonders what he went through to collaborate with Huaying and secure that incredible contract. She feels guilty for not knowing. She is upset that he did so much without telling her, worried that he might have suffered or been mistreated along the way. She worried if people had been cold to him, or just how much energy he had exhausted to create such a masterpiece. Meanwhile, at the Tianmei Entertainment branch in the city center, Liuli's face was so gloomy it looked as if it might bruise. Her manager, Qingjia, looked equally miserable, and the atmosphere in the room was heavy enough to stifle anyone nearby. Only Zhao Chuchu sat a short distance away, secretly laughing to herself with a look of pure, unadulterated schadenfreude. Liuli glanced at her manager, thinking this aging woman was becoming increasingly useless at her job. She demanded to know why her song, originally set for a late July release on Huaying, had been pushed back to August. The company's promotion was already out, and she had just bought a trending spot, yet Huaying had delayed her without a word. To make matters worse, Bufan's video had hijacked every trending topic, and Liuli wanted an immediate explanation from Qingjia. Qingjia's expression darkened further. She was already in a foul mood without Liuli shouting at her like a spoiled child. In that moment, her anger flared, and she snapped back that if Liuli wanted an explanation, she should go find Huaying herself. No one could have predicted Bufan would appear out of nowhere and force Huaying to move their release schedule forward. If she didn't rely on Liuli for her paycheck, Qingjia wouldn't have bothered speaking to her at all. Realizing they were both stuck in the same sinking boat, Xingjie forced a cold smile and suggested a new plan. Liuli realized she had no other choice, though she spent the moment silently cursing Buffon with every breath. In her mind, it was Buffon who had stolen the spotlight and the popularity that rightfully belonged to her. When she turned her head and saw Zhao Chuchu still stifling a laugh nearby, her temper finally reached its breaking point. She shrieked at Chuchu to come over and clean up the mess, her voice sharp enough to shatter glass. Zhao Chuchu simply dug at her ear, looking entirely unbothered by the screaming diva in front of her. With a triumphant laugh, she announced that her contract expired today and she had already submitted her resignation. She sat back, crossing her legs and sipping tea, while Liuli stood up, pointing a finger in speechless, trembling rage. Liuli's face shifted through shades of blue and white, unable to utter a single word for a long time. Meanwhile, we see that lunch has already passed. Our family of 3 happily takes a taxi out, and by the afternoon, you arrive right on time at the 4S dealership to a warm welcome. Sir, madam, is there a specific model you're interested in? The salesperson asks, her eyes practically glowing with anticipation. With years of experience, she knows that 80% of families who visit together end up buying. You simply nod in response. He and Shin Yuchu had already done their research at home and picked a model before coming. Do you have the H9? He asks. The salesperson confirms they have the top-tier configuration in stock, sounding quite eager to please. She explains that they have 2 top-spec H9s ready for immediate delivery, one in quicksand gold and another in gentian purple. She asks which one they'd like to see first, leading the way into the showroom as she speaks. Let's see the gentian purple, he decides, thinking it looks a bit more profound. To be honest, it was a solid choice. This was something they had agreed upon at home. The purple looked more elegant and would certainly command respect on the road. You have excellent taste, sir, the salesperson remarks, noting that the color perfectly suits his wife's refined temperament. She leads them directly to the vehicle, introducing the top-spec gentian purple H9 and inviting him to take a seat inside. He lets out a small laugh and declines. Yuchu, let me hold Wan. Why don't you give it a try? We see Shin Yochu's eyes light up the moment she looks at the car. It's clear she is more than satisfied with it. Feeling a bit shy, her face flushes slightly, but she gathers her courage and hands little Wan over to him. As she sits inside, she remembers how she used to dream of owning her own car. Today, that dream was actually coming true. The car is beautiful, with elegant yet powerful lines. Seeing how much Yuchu loves it makes him feel even happier. With a generous flourish, he pulls out his bank card and driver's license. This is the one. I'll pay the full amount now. The salesperson's grin stretches from ear to ear as she promises the best possible discount while she goes to prepare the paperwork. He doesn't have to wait long before she returns, carrying the purchase contract and all the necessary documents. The group moves over to the lounge area to sit down. For a full cash payment, the salesperson offers a final price. She quotes him $385,000, covering insurance and registration, while throwing in a full set of seat covers and a car wrap. The car will be ready by tomorrow. He simply nods, enters his PIN without a word, and completes the payment and paperwork. After arranging to pick up the vehicle the following morning, he and his family happily leave the dealership behind. By the time they return home, it's already 5 in the evening. Just then, he receives a call from Lixia. Hello, genius. Congratulations. The internet is absolutely flooded with that MV and news about you. You've officially gone viral. He laughs, noting that he didn't exactly ask for fame, but surely her company has benefited greatly from the exposure. That's all thanks to you, she replies. But business first. When is Shin Yuchu coming in to report for work? Lixia teases him over the phone before asking with a smile. He glances over at the sofa, where a certain someone is listening. We see Shin Yuchu perk up her ears to eavesdrop. He smiles and says she'll be there in 2 days, once things at home are settled. Lixia agrees to wait for her grand arrival, though deep down, she is incredibly curious about this woman. She wonders what kind of personality could make a man work so hard for her. True to their word, the dealership is efficient. By 10 the next morning, the salesperson calls to confirm the plates are on and the insurance is ready for pickup. He leaves the task of picking up the car to Shin Yuchu, staying home himself to look after little Wan. After successfully collecting the vehicle and taking a quick test drive, Shin Yuchu heads straight toward the city center. She plans to find Chuchu and Sister Yin to take them to Starry Entertainment. Yuchu has already made up her mind. She intends to report for work tomorrow. Though he said she could wait, she has her own little reasons for starting early. Beyond singing being her dream, she doesn't want to be a mere ornament who relies entirely on him. At this moment, Shin Yuchu has no idea that Zhao Chuchu has already resigned. She parks her new car near the Tianmei Entertainment building. She calls Zhao Chuchu, wanting to surprise her. The call connects quickly, and a bright smile spreads across Shin Yuchu's face. Her voice is bright with excitement as she asks Chuchu to guess where she is. Meanwhile, Zhao Chuchu is back at her rented apartment. She is busy packing her things, having decided to return to her hometown after resigning. And it is at this exact moment that she receives the call from Shin Yuchu. She asks where else her friend could possibly be, only for Yuchu to call her a silly girl and reveal she's downstairs. She tells Chuchu to come down quickly because she has something to say. Zhao Chuchu panics for a moment, her heart racing. She wonders why Shin Yuchu has suddenly shown up at her old office. To be honest, she has no idea how to break the news. She doesn't know how to explain that she's already quit and is planning to leave the city. Fortunately, her apartment isn't far from the Tianmei Entertainment Building. A few minutes later, she arrives downstairs out of breath, looking around frantically until she hears a voice calling her name. We see her turn to find Shin Yuchu stepping out of a brand new car, waving at her with a radiant smile. Stunned, Zhao Chuchu asks if she bought a car, her eyes narrowing in a look of beautiful confusion as she rushes over. She stares at the shiny vehicle with a look of pure disbelief. She can't help but wonder why that man would buy Shin Yuchu a car. She had assumed he treated her poorly, but Shin Yuchu just nods and takes her hand, confirming it was a recent purchase. She explains she came to discuss something and asks if Chuchu is free. It's then that Zhao Chuchu notices a change in her friend. Shin Yuchu looks different than the last time they met. Her skin is glowing, and she looks much healthier and more vibrant. Her complexion has improved significantly, but more importantly, that old sense of confidence seems to have finally returned. Looking at her former assistant with eyes full of hope, Shin Yuchu grips her hand tightly and makes her proposal. She asks Chuchu to be her assistant again, suggesting they find Sister Yun because she is making a comeback. Zhao Chuchu freezes in shock. She can hardly believe her ears, but a second later, she is jumping for joy, feeling as though fate has finally stepped in. She exclaims that the timing is perfect since she just resigned, meaning they can fight side by side again. Now, it's Shin Yuchu's turn to be stunned. She realizes only now that Chuchu had already quit, and a wave of guilt and sadness washes over her. She immediately apologizes. She admits she was too stubborn in the past, but reiterates her plan to return before asking if Chuchu knows where Sister Yun is. We're going to find her right now, Zhao Chuchu declares, immediately providing the address. She knows Sister Yun is surely at the hospital caring for her mother. Shin Yuchu wastes no time and has Chuchu hop into the car. The two rush toward the hospital, but as they travel, a question arises. Zhao Chuchu eyes the brand new interior and asks curiously, Sister Shun, does he know about your comeback? Shin Yuchu nods, her lips curling into a small, involuntary smile. He knows. In fact, he was the one who negotiated her new contract. She adds that he even bought her this car, a revelation that leaves Zhao Chuchu's mouth hanging open in pure shock. Shin Yuchu shakes her head and drops an even bigger bombshell. It's true, he negotiated a top-tier contract for her with Fancheng Entertainment. And it's the highest level of contract possible. Zhao Chuchu is utterly stunned, unable to fathom how that man could pull off such a feat. Seeing her silence, Shin Yuchu continues, noting that he is actually treating her very well now. She asks Chuchu not to treat him with that old attitude. Chuchu snaps out of it, jokingly teasing her about being so protective of her man. I'm jealous now, Chuchu teases, and I won't be easily comforted. Shin Yuchu's face flushes red, but she doesn't argue as they arrive at the hospital. Standing before room 302, Shin Yuchu feels a wave of nervous apprehension. But the moment she knocks and the door opens, the sight of Sister Yun nearly brings her to tears. The woman's once black hair is now streaked with prominent strands of white. Her resilient face is etched with the hardships she's endured. To be honest, she looks exactly like Shin Yuchu did not so long ago. Sister Yun freezes when she sees Shin Yuchu, staring at her in a daze. For a long moment, the two simply look at each other in silence. It's Zhao Chuchu who finally runs in to break the tension, announcing that she and Shin Yuchu have come to find her. Sister Yun snaps back to reality, nervously rubbing her hands. She asks why they didn't call ahead, clearly embarrassed by her current appearance. She forces a smile, saying her mother is doing better and just needs one more surgery. Yet, we can see the bitterness hidden in that smile. She is at the end of her rope, already owing over 100,000. She has no idea how she will pay for the next operation. Shin Yuchu enters the room, her head bowed and her lip tucked between her teeth like a child who has done something wrong. Sister Yun approaches and takes her hand, a look of genuine relief on her face. She is simply happy to see her friend looking so well. I'm just happy to see you're doing well, Sister Yun says softly. She reminds Shin Yuchu that if she was ever strict before, it was only for her own good. At that moment, Shin Yuchu can no longer hold back. Sobbing an apology, she throws herself into Sister Yun's arms as tears fall like rain. Sister Yun gently pats her back, offering quiet comfort. She tells her there's no need to apologize, for no mother could ever truly blame her own child. I've always treated you like my own daughter, she whispers. Hearing this, Shin Yuchu cries even harder while Sister Yun simply holds her close. She continues to soothe her until the tears finally subside. Shin Yuchu eventually looks up with red, swollen eyes and sees Sister Yun's tender smile. Sister Yun, I'm making my comeback. Will you be my manager again? She asks. Upon hearing this, Sister Yun is visibly taken aback. Her brow furrows instantly as she asks what will happen to the child. She wonders if that boy, Lu Fan, is really the one looking after him. In Sister Yun's eyes, Lu Fan never seemed like the fatherly type, but Shin Yuchu nods firmly, insisting that Lu Fan is the father. She is certain he will take good care of little Wanwan. Sister Yun rubs her temples, trying to suppress the deep-seated doubts in her heart. Even if he can handle the childcare, a comeback is no small feat. She asks if there is even a company willing to sign her yet. She wonders what kind of resources they could possibly offer. Before she can finish, Shin Yuchu pulls a contract from her bag and hands it over. This is the contract from Fanching Entertainment, she explains. Seeing that name, Sister Yun freezes in absolute disbelief. After all, they are one of the three giants in the industry. She takes the document half-heartedly, but as she reads, her shock only grows. By the time she reaches the end, her hands are actually trembling. This contract is so perfect it seems divine. She wonders if Shin Yuchu kidnapped the boss. It promises top-tier resources, no restrictions on her personal freedom, and a short 2-year term. To be honest, it sounds too good to be true. These are essentially overlord terms in favor of the artist. Sister Yun looks up, her voice shaking as she asks if this is actually real. Of course it's real, Shin Yuchu explains quickly, pointing to the official Fanching Entertainment seal so her friend will believe her. Sister Yun is completely stunned, staring blankly at the pages. In all her years as a manager, she has never seen terms quite like these. It's almost absurd. She wonders if the people at Fanching have lost their minds. Shin Yuchu emphasizes that she has to report for work tomorrow. Finally, Sister Yun begins to believe it, though the look of pure astonishment doesn't leave her face as she gazes at Yuchu. Sister Yun asks her to be honest about how she secured such a contract, and Shin Yuchu finally breathes a sigh of relief, her cheeks turning slightly red. She explains that Lu Fan went to Modu to get it for her after writing a song for Fanching Entertainment, a statement that leaves Sister Yun questioning reality. The idea that Lu Fan wrote a song in exchange for such an incredible contract seems like a total fairy tale, or perhaps just completely absurd. Sister Yun tells her not to be offended, but she simply can't believe it. Even if he could write, what kind of song could be worth a contract like this? Seeing that Sister Yun is still skeptical, Shin Yuchu insists he really did write it and immediately pulls out her phone to prove her point. She opens the platform to an account named Bu Fan, and as Sister Yun half-heartedly takes the phone, Zhao Chuchu leans in to see as well. A second later, Zhao Chuchu cries out in shock at the sight of over 100 million likes, before quickly covering her mouth in surprise. After all, they are in a hospital ward. Sister Yun is equally stunned, wondering what kind of video could possibly garner over 100 million likes. Then she notices the account name, Bu Fan, followed by a collaboration with Huayin, and a truly ridiculous thought begins to form in her mind. Zhao Chuchu whispers in a frantic gasp, asking if Lu Fan is actually Bu Fan, the most famous and mysterious person on the entire internet right now. Seeing the two of them looking so utterly shocked, Shin Yuchu's face turns even redder as she confirms that yes, it really is him. Sister Yun finally snaps out of her daze and hands the phone back with a complicated expression. She is happy for Yuchu's bright future, but then she wavers. With a heavy sigh, she tells Yuchu that with her talent, she can surely find a better manager, suggesting that she herself should step aside. Shin Yuchu cries out, asking if Sister Yun is abandoning her, but the older woman simply looks toward the hospital room with a face full of helplessness. She explains that her mother needs constant care and she truly cannot leave, and though Yuchu suggests hiring a nanny, Sister Yun looks troubled. The truth is, she doesn't have the money for a nanny and fears she would only hold Yuchu back, so she tells her to stop trying to persuade her. She urges Yuchu to cherish this incredible opportunity and not to be so headstrong in the future, before turning away with a heavy heart. Shin Yuchu bites her lip, unable to understand why Sister Yun is so unwilling to come with her, even when hope seemed so close at hand. Returning in disappointment, Shin Yuchu remains silent the whole way, and after dropping Zhao Chuchu off, she drives home alone in the quiet. But when the door opens and Lu Fan sees her, he can't help but notice her tears and asks if things didn't go as planned. As soon as those words leave his mouth, Shin Yuchu's expression collapses, and she slumps onto the sofa with a heavy heart. Seeing Lu Fan is like finding her only anchor. Her eyes begin to well up again as she admits that Sister Yun refused to go with her. She pours out her grievances while he listens in silence, only nodding thoughtfully once she finishes, simply saying that he understands. Suddenly, Lu Fan stands up and calls her a little fool, telling her to stay home with Wan Wan while he heads out for a moment. Shin Yuchu looks utterly displeased, though it's hard to tell if it's because he called her a fool or because she doesn't want him to leave. He looks back with a mysterious smile, promising to bring back the person who matters so much to her before stepping out the door. Our story continues as he first visits a domestic service agency, then drives straight to the hospital, though he doesn't go to Sister Yun immediately. Instead, he finds the attending physician to learn everything about Sister Yun's mother's condition before finally heading up to the ward. Arriving at room 302, he takes a moment to steady his emotions, replacing his warmth with a mask of cold indifference. He gives the door a soft knock, and a second later, Sister Yun appears with eyes that are still slightly red from crying. She freezes at the sight of him, but Lu Fan speaks with a calm, commanding presence, asking if she isn't going to let him in. Sister Yun frowns but steps aside to let him enter. As he walks in, we see a frail, white-haired woman looking over from the bed. The elderly woman, clearly worn down by illness, asks if he is a friend, but before Sister Yun can answer, Lu Fan intervenes. He walks quickly to the bedside, introducing himself by saying his wife is a very close friend of Sister Yun. He explains that his wife visited earlier but didn't want to disturb her while she slept, prompting a kind smile from the old woman. She remarks on how thoughtful they are, and Lu Fan immediately insists that having Sister Yun as a friend is actually their good fortune. He begins to chatter away, mentioning how his wife talks about Sister Yun's kindness so much that his ears have practically grown calluses. Then, he shifts the tone, mentioning that his wife wanted to work with Sister Yun, but Sister Yun refused out of concern for her mother's health. He adds that his wife went home crying her eyes out, causing Sister Yun's expression to change instantly behind him. To Sister Yun, he clearly looks like a lobbyist sent by Yuchu, but her mother is intrigued, asking what this job is all about. Sister Yun's mother has no idea what her daughter actually does for a living, and upon hearing this, her gray eyebrows furrow in immediate concern. Sister Yun shoots Lu Fan a sharp glare and quickly tries to explain that there is no job, but the elderly woman is far from foolish. She immediately reaches out to grab Lu Fan's hand, asking him to explain the job, while he pretends to hesitate, glancing nervously at Sister Yun. Finally, he slowly explains that the job requires travel, and though they offered to hire a nurse for her, Sister Yun refused to leave her side. The old woman turns to her daughter with a look of gentle reproach, calling her a silly child for staying behind on her account. She insists that if the job requires travel, she should simply go, leaving Sister Yun feeling frantic and secretly resentful of Lu Fan's interference. The real reason she can't leave, of course, is that she can't afford a nurse. She hasn't even secured the money for her mother's next surgery yet. At that moment, Lu Fan calmly suggests that he and Sister Yun step outside to talk, giving the old woman a polite smile as he prepares to lead the way. He turns and walks out of the ward, and Sister Yun, gritting her teeth in frustration, has no choice but to follow him into the hallway. She demands to know what he is trying to do, but he merely looks down at her, stating the facts with a cold, detached air. He tells her she can view him as the villain, but his only goal is to stop Shin Yuchu from worrying about her and losing her focus. He pauses for a beat before dropping a bombshell. He has already paid for her mother's next surgery. He adds that he has already contacted a nursing agency and hands her the number to choose a caregiver herself, prompting a bitter, angry laugh from her. Lu Fan merely shrugs like a shameless rogue, telling her not to overthink it. She will have to pay him back through her future wages. He looks her in the eye and makes it clear that her arrangement with Yuchu is personal and has nothing to do with the company. He claims he doesn't care how much Yuchu pays her, but since this is his personal money, he expects every cent back eventually. He throws his hands up with an air of total indifference, noting that since the surgery and nurse are already paid for, there are no refunds anyway. He tells her that what she does next is entirely up to her, and without giving her a moment to respond, he turns to walk away. As he nears the exit, Sister Yun calls out from behind, pleading with him not to tell Shin Yuchu about any of this. Without looking back, he simply gives a casual wave and disappears, leaving Sister Yun staring down the empty hallway with a deeply conflicted gaze. After a long silence, Sister Yun finally returns to the ward, where her mother, noticing she is alone, pats the edge of the bed for her to sit. She tells her daughter not to blame Lu Fan, insisting he is a good man and that her many years of experience allow her to see his true character. The elderly woman takes her daughter's hand, speaking with heartfelt sincerity about how there are many paths in life and she shouldn't choose the wrong one. She claims she will regret it later if she stays, especially since her health is improving and one more surgery should be enough to cure her. The doctor said the risk is low, so she urges her daughter to go, admitting it would break her heart to be the reason for her daughter's future regret. Sister Yin keeps her head low in silence for a long time before finally nodding, while we return to Lu Fan, who has just arrived back home. Shin Yuchu immediately rushes over with a face full of curiosity, but Lu Fan deliberately ignores her, happily picking up little Wanwan instead. He asks Wanwan what she wants for dinner, leaving Shin Yuchu frozen in place, staring at him with a look of utter disbelief. He walks right past her, and the little girl, completely unaware of her mother's falling expression, chirps that she loves whatever daddy cooks. Lu Fan gives the little one a kiss and promises to start cooking immediately, turning toward the kitchen without a second glance at Yuchu. Shin Yuchu pouts, her face a mask of grievance as she declares she is angry, her expression practically accusing him of a crime. She can't believe he is ignoring her after she spent the whole day waiting anxiously at home, but he simply turns around with a look of pure innocence. He asks her what's wrong, which only makes her angrier. He was calling her a silly girl so tenderly this morning, yet now he's playing dumb. She huffs and sits on the sofa with her arms crossed, so Lu Fan finally stops teasing her and tells her to remember her bodyguards tomorrow. He notes that with her temper, she'd likely be bullied to death if she didn't bring them along, a slight exaggeration, perhaps, but he isn't taking chances. Shin Yuchu's eyes light up instantly, a change of mood so fast it surprises him, as she asks if Sister Yin finally agreed to the plan. He tells her she did, then heads to the kitchen, refusing to explain how he managed it because he knows playing mysterious is far more effective. This doesn't stop her from looking at him with growing admiration, as she has begun to feel that since he changed, there is nothing he can't do. The next morning, Shin Yuchu is up early, and for once, Lu Fan skips his morning run to stay home with her. The two work in the kitchen together in quiet harmony while Wanwan sleeps, as Yuchu fears that if the child wakes up, she won't be able to leave. Once breakfast is ready, Lu Fan eats in silence while Shun Yuchu sits beside him, offering a steady stream of motherly advice. She tells him to remember to call often, otherwise little Wanwan will miss him, and insists he share any troubles he faces while away. She warns him not to keep things bottled up like a fool. Meanwhile, Lu Fan sips his porridge, listening intently to her every word. A sudden sense of loss washes over him, and for a moment, he doesn't want to leave at all, lingering over his meal until the bowl is empty. Just then, his phone rings, and it takes a gentle reminder from Yuchu for him to snap out of it and answer with a quiet, "Hello, Sister Shun." She tells him she is ready and that Sister Yun is with her, asking when he'll arrive. He promises to be there shortly if they can wait just a bit longer. He tells her he will see her downstairs soon, and as he hangs up, Shin Yuchu looks up at him with a gaze that stops him in his tracks. The complex emotion in her eyes makes his heart flutter, and he has to admit to himself that Yuchu is truly breathtakingly beautiful. He quickly turns away to look at the luggage in the living room, noting it's time to head out so they don't keep the others waiting. Shin Yuchu withdraws her gaze and says in a soft, clear voice that she wants to check on Wanwan one last time before she goes. We follow them into the bedroom, where the little one is fast asleep in a tangled heap, completely unaware that her mother is about to depart. Yuchu leans down to kiss the child's small face repeatedly, burying her cheek against the girl's neck for one final, lingering moment of warmth. She finally forces herself to stand, looking back 3 times before leaving the room, while Lu Fan silently follows to help load the luggage. He watches her settle into the driver's seat and closes the door, stepping to the side as she turns to tell him she's leaving. He reminds her to come home often or the little one will surely cause a fuss. She nods, but as the engine starts, she suddenly turns back. With an expression of absolute sincerity, she tells Lu Fan that she likes him, and before he can even process the words, she is gone. The car speeds away toward the city center, where Zhao Chuchu has been waiting with an impatience that borders on the desperate. Beside her, Sister Yin shakes her head at the girl's restlessness, but Chuchu's face lights up the moment she spots Shin Yochu's car arriving. Chuchu waves frantically as Yuchu pulls up and takes her hand, apologizing to both her and Sister Yin for making them wait so long. Sister Yin simply smiles, assuring her it wasn't long at all and noting that Chuchu is simply a very impatient young lady by nature. She never imagined that the 3 of them would have a day of reunion like this, and all of it, surprisingly enough, was because of that man who looked like a pretty boy. Sister Yin, thank you for coming. Without you and Chuchu, I wouldn't know what to do. Sister Yin simply patted her hand with a professional, capable expression, telling her that she was already a mother and shouldn't act like a child. She added that Shin Yuchu should really be thanking her man instead, a comment that caused Yuchu to blush a deep, instant crimson. To be honest, she still had no idea how he had convinced Sister Yin to join them, but with very little luggage, the car was packed easily. Once they were inside, Zhao Chuchu waved her hand and shouted with pure excitement, "Let's go! The bright road ahead is waiting for us." As the car sped toward the city of Modu, we shift our focus to the Star Entertainment building located in the heart of the metropolis. Li Xia had arrived at her office early, but she found herself restless all day. Finally, when noon arrived, she decided she had waited long enough. She headed downstairs immediately, waiting by the building entrance just to see what kind of woman this man pampered so much. She wondered what sort of person she truly was, and before long, a car with Jiangsheng plates pulled into the parking lot. Li Xia narrowed her eyes as 3 people stepped out. One was full of youthful energy and chatter, while the other was clearly older. Seeing these 2 companions, she realized that Shun Yochu's character must be quite good to attract such friends. Then, she turned her gaze toward the woman herself, watching her every move with a quiet, analytical intensity. She stepped forward quickly and introduced herself as Li Xia, the deputy head of human resources at Star Entertainment. "Welcome to the team," she said, and Shun Yuchu replied in her soft voice, quietly observing this elegant older woman in return. She noted that Li Xia had a wonderful temperament and a pleasant voice, appearing surprisingly clean and pure in her professional role. But deep down, Li Xia was wondering how such a good woman had been charmed away by Lu Fan in the first place. She uncharacteristically looked away first, turning to Zhao Chuchu and Sister Yun to ask who they were in relation to the new arrival. Shun Yuchu answered earnestly, though she couldn't help but feel that while this woman was polite, her reaction was somewhat strange. She tilted her head in confusion, and as a sudden thought crossed her mind, the light in her eyes dimmed just a little. Li Xia nodded to the 2 companions, thinking that bringing her own team would certainly save time, before turning her focus back to the group. "Let me show you around first," she said, noting they'd be working here for 2 years before taking them to their new apartment. As they followed Li Xia into the building, Zhao Chuchu found herself completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the place. It was far more luxurious than Tianmei Entertainment back in Jiangcheng. Here, they could see famous stars from the trending charts at every turn. This was a different world entirely, considering that in Jiangcheng, even a second-tier singer could act like royalty. Li Xia led them into the elevator up to the 11th floor, enthusiastically explaining that this entire level was dedicated to recording studios. We see that the rooms are filled with top-tier professional equipment, and she soon suggests they head to the 12th floor's exclusive lounges. That floor was for composing and business, and along the way, many people greeted Li Xia with strangely flattering expressions. Shin Yuchu was increasingly confused, unable to understand why these strangers looked at her with such obvious flashes of jealousy. She wondered why a deputy head of HR commanded such odd looks, but things became even more absurd a moment later. A balding man wearing a head of human resources badge actually stopped in his tracks just to greet Li Xia first. He even greeted Yuchu herself, who responded with a mix of surprise and flattery, thinking this manager named Zhang Hao was incredibly polite. To be honest, his temperament seemed far too kind compared to the arrogant leaders she had dealt with back at Tianmei. Just then, Li Xia stopped at the very end of a long corridor and pointed toward a door, announcing it would be Youchu's private lounge. Shin Yuchu looked up to see a closed door with a digital keypad, where her own name was already displayed prominently on the nameplate. As Li Xia entered the default code, she told her it was currently set to 6s and that she should change it later for her own privacy. The door swung open, and as they stepped inside, Zhao Chuchu let out a sudden gasp at the sheer size of the room. The decor was so incredibly lavish that even Shin Yuchu stood there in shock, having never seen such a magnificent workspace in her life. Zhao Chuchu felt like she might faint from joy, especially when she remembered the cramped, dingy rooms they had used back at Tianmei. It was a stark reminder that comparison truly is the thief of joy, and had they been alone, she likely would have dived onto the sofa in delight. Li Xia couldn't help but smile as she watched their surprised expressions, knowing full well that not everyone receives such top-tier treatment and resources. Naturally, the lounge had to be top-tier as well, and hearing this, Zhao Chuchu suddenly felt a shift in her perspective. That fellow Lu Fan didn't seem quite so detestable anymore, and even as they stepped back outside, Chuchu remained immersed in her joy. Just then, a nearby door swung open, and an elegant, wealthy-looking woman stepped out, the sharp click of her high heels echoing in the hall. A small assistant followed closely behind her, and when the woman spotted the group, a flash of surprise crossed her face for only a fleeting second. She quickly greeted Li Xia, noting with interest that Sister Li was personally showing someone the rooms before mentioning she was heading out. Lena explained she had a meeting that afternoon and bid them farewell, though she couldn't resist casting a lingering glance at Shin Yuchu before leaving. She walked away with an elegant stride, and Li Xia turned back to our group with her signature smile once again firmly in place. She explained that the floors above were just meeting rooms and suggested they head straight to the apartment to drop off their luggage before dinner. Shin Yuchu felt that the woman's enthusiasm was perhaps a bit excessive, and while her impression of the company was good, something felt off. Everything seemed to be tinged with a strange mystery, and as they entered the elevator, Yuchu finally asked if she was close with Lu Fan. The smile on Li Xia's face froze for a moment, confirming Youchu's suspicions and causing a flicker of complicated emotion in her eyes. Deep down, she felt a slight, inexplicable sting, but Xia quickly recovered, explaining she had simply handled his intake and the subsequent cooperation. She claimed they were merely familiar because of work, to which Yuchu offered only a soft, non-committal hum before falling silent. The group headed downstairs, where Li Xia led the way in her gray Mercedes, acting as their guide through the city streets. Shin Yuchu followed slowly behind in her own car, while Zhao Chuchu spent the entire ride mindlessly praising how wonderful everything was. It wasn't until Sister Yin gave her a pointed look that she finally quieted down and asked Yuchu if something was wrong. Yuchu without saying a word. She could tell at a glance that someone had fallen right into a vat of jealousy.